Good afternoon, patrons, and welcome to the October sort of 2019 Patroncast. It is that time of the month again, and it's gonna be an interesting one because, this is the first Patroncast we've done since we made the great big announcement, the coming attractions video, all of that. That was a bit overdramatic. In retrospect, that was probably too much, because, people came out of that saying, oh my goodness, it's gonna be a reboot of the channel, it's gonna change everything, and really, if you just missed that video, and you just kind of came in the following week, you might just think, oh, things have just been slightly rearranged. It's much the same as it ever was, it's just in a slightly different order. So now Stellaris is on Monday and Friday. But that's fine, that's all as it ever was. So it wasn't really like a major relaunch. Arguably, I went into it with the wrong ethos, saying, hey, we should make a massive video, bigging it up, and I'll tell Claire to make a thumbnail that's a big coming attraction sign at a cinema, because everything's changing and diddly-diddly-dee. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. That kind of set expectations a bit on the wrong side. But whatever, it's all been good, it's all been fun. Actually, it has been fun. It's been very, very good indeed, because basically, all that's really changed in terms of, the actual number of videos is we have produced a very slightly smaller number of videos, but in terms of views, that seems to be ever so slightly up. It's not like a massive change or anything. It's not like change the whole channel or anything like that. But there are slightly more views, and those views have slightly longer watch times, meaning the number of watch minutes seems to be, noticeably up. And that's a big metric YouTube cares about when it decides whether it's going to bother sharing your videos in the sidebar or make them rank when people search for terms and diddly-diddly-dee. So that's good. That's honestly a good sign, because I broadly would have been happy with pretty much flat. If we were just producing slightly smaller numbers of videos, but we were making exactly the same number of views and watch minutes as before, I would have been okay with that. But actually, it seems to be ever so slightly up. Not a huge amount, but broadly, I'm happy with it, because I've just slightly eased off just a constant treadmill of never-ending must produce more videos ethos, and I haven't immediately tanked the channel. So there are positive signs. Likes appear to be up, shares appear to be up, and that's really important. Right there, that's a really important one. Comments are slightly up. The number of new subscribers coming in versus the 2 months previous is slightly up. So there's positive movement across the board, but it's really not that dramatic, and I can't isolate that, of course, because this isn't a scientific experiment. You could just say, well, going into October and then into November, things are naturally going to be better anyway, because that tends to happen every year, because there's lots of big new releases. Obviously, we've had The Outer Worlds come along, which has got good views, so that kind of partly explains it. So it's very unscientific. What I can say is, at the bare minimum, I haven't ruined everything. So that's positive. That's very, very positive indeed. And just in terms of me making stuff I'm really proud of, if I consider, say, the week before we made the change versus the couple of weeks after, I'm much happier because, the week before we had a few videos that were just I call them fine. They're okay. The Ghostbusters video was fine. The Warsaw video I thought was pretty good because that had some history in it, so that was kind of fun right there. The Flotsam video was fine. The Star Fox video was okay. That was fine. I was happy enough with that, but I was not exactly thrilled by it. But then the following week after, we brought back the full story. We had Mario Party, which people thought was fun. We had Mountain Blade Warband, of course. We had another automation game. Earth Defense Force came back. Surviving the Aftermath got a video. Actually, I was a little bit underwhelmed with Surviving the Aftermath. I thought it was pretty solid, just it didn't quite have the magic of certain other city builders to me. So I was slightly underwhelmed with that, but people seem to really enjoy it, because people just seem to enjoy me playing city builders, so I should clearly just do more city builders. So that all worked pretty darn well. And then, of course, The Outer World showed up, and that's done very, very well indeed. Actually, Ring Fit Adventure went down very, very well, so that was good. So basically, I've just got a little bit more time to really think about what ought to be on the channel and make those videos really, really, really damn good. And I think for the most part, even if, the numbers are, at worst, flat, at best, just a little bit up, I'm happier with what I'm making for the time being. I am happier, and some of the underlying metrics, say, shares in particular, are looking positive. So, I'm pretty happy with how things are going. The bit that hasn't really kind of worked as I was intending was the Wednesday livestream thing, where we officially did one of those, and then 3 in a row of, like, not that. Where we did, yeah, just a Mount and Blade video continuation. Then Stellaris, so there'd be room for Outer Worlds later in that week. And then, of course, this week we had more Outer Worlds. So, yeah, that hasn't really worked out. But that's kind of the Outer Worlds' fault. So the Outer Worlds not been here. And by the way, I'm going to call it the Outer Wilds at some point during this Patroncast. Probably, like, you know, several times. Drink every time that happens. I get the Outer Worlds or the Outer Wilds the wrong way around. Actually, don't do that because I don't want you to die. So for the time being, yeah, I'm not sure I've got enough data to draw any conclusions here. So I'm going to make November very much like October, which is we're going to keep doing Outer Worlds on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday because it doesn't seem like it's a very long game from what I've heard. I think actually, you know, at this point I'm starting to make faster progress through it once I was kind of, you know, getting to grips with the basics on Edgewater. I felt like actually, yeah, it's not the biggest game in the world, so I don't think that's going to be a long series. So that potentially opens the door to doing something with Pokemon. I'm not 100% sure on that. We'll see. We'll see how I feel about Pokemon and how the first part does, because that could become a brief series of some description too. We'll have to see. And then, yeah, back into Crusader Kings 2 after that's done. So, Outer Worlds is going to be a series. Pokemon might be a short series too. We'll see. And then we're in to Crusader Kings 2. Though I might decide to do Crusader Kings 2 at the same time as the Pokemon series. If maybe I decide to, like, I don't know, stream the Pokemon series. We'll see. We'll have to see. I'm not really decided on that. But yeah, just looking at what I've got planned over the next few weeks, yeah, I'm really happy with it. Just because the extra space I've got means I can basically only do videos I look at and think, yeah, that's going to be a really damn solid video. So yeah, we've got a really good multiplayer thing coming up with Claire. Planet Zoo is obviously going to be launching soon. I've got something special planned for that. Ooh, I've got something really special tentatively penciled in for November the 9th, the Saturday. That's an old favourite making a reappearance, doing a little bit of a special, yeah, thing. So yeah, there's a bunch of specials coming up, which I'm rather happy with. And yeah, some old favourites of mine as well. In fact, actually, ooh, that's a good point. I just spotted I should be doing a themed week because, yeah, this week, the Halloween week, I've really enjoyed Halloween week. So, yeah, I've just realised I should have a plan for one of the weeks in November, another themed week. Right, good. Glad I was staring at the calendar right now because I've just had an idea. So that's marvellously good news. But yeah, in general, like, for me, just the most important thing is I'm happier with what I'm producing. I think the videos I'm making right now are better than they were. There are less videos I'm putting out there where I'm just thinking, you know what, this is fine, but for the most part it's just keeping the channel ticking along. I'm much happier with what I'm making. So yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. That's kind of like my first read on it. So yeah, I'll keep on monitoring it and we'll see if the Wednesday live stream just sort of fades away and gets replaced with just like a series of some description because not sure what's going to happen with that. Maybe when the Outer Worlds is done, I'll try and reclaim that spot for the live stream so there is one less video a week. We can just do the live stream on the Wednesday because that will give me a bit more time to work on the specials that I'm so excited for. So we'll see about that. Wednesday's been the wibble. Other than that, I've been broadly happy with how it's been going. So yeah, that's been positive. That's been very, very positive indeed. Anyway, let's dive into the questions, as I'm sure there's going to be, yeah, some more people asking specific questions about the new schedule and diddly-diddly-dee. So we might come back to that depending on who's asking what. So, let's dive in, see what we got. John, since it's October, what's the scariest true story that has happened to you? Oh, okay. Can't remember if I've ever told this story on the Patroncast or whatever before, but I was once babysitting for my sister, my two little nieces, back when they were very, very young indeed. So I was just basically doing the equivalent of house sitting, because they were both young, so they'd already gone to bed. They'd already gone to bed long ago. So I was basically just sitting up and, like, watching TV, having a bit of dinner or whatever. And then I hear something. And I mute the TV so I can hear it better. And it sounds like children's laughter. Like slightly distant, creepy children's laughter. So okay, I'm a little bit perturbed, but I wouldn't say I'm scared yet. That probably just means one of my nieces has woken up and has woken up the other one, and they're saying something to each other or making each other laugh or something. So I just walk upstairs and I check the rooms, and okay, the lights are out. They're both in their rooms. They've both gone to bed. They're both asleep. So now I'm getting a little bit worried, but it's fine. It was probably just like coming off the street or something. So that's fine. Go back downstairs, sit down back on the sofa. Nothing to worry about. I hear it again. I hear it slightly louder. And it's definitely not coming from the street. It's coming from the room I'm in. And I've turned off the TV, and the girls are accounted for. They're upstairs. There is no one in this room but me, and there is a child's laughter coming from within this room, somewhere very close to me, and I cannot identify the source, and I am absolutely flipping terrified by this point, because I cannot come up with any logical explanation for this whatsoever. And then I do discover what the logical explanation is, which is, it's my sister's phone, which she accidentally left at home, stuck down the back of the sofa, like fell down behind one of the cushions, and her ringtone, for whatever reason, is set to, like, her kids laughing. So it's a recording of her kids laughing at some point. That's her ringtone. And when she couldn't find her phone, she asked her husband to ring her phone in case it was, like, at the bottom of her bag or something. So he did that a couple of times, and that's what the noise was. It was her ringtone going off from a phone down the back of the sofa. But I was terrified. John, I just blew my medical school interview. I'm so sorry to hear that, Jacob. What game do you play to cheer yourself up the most? I like going into games I can sort of play on autopilot because I know them so well. So one of the Total War games that I know better, probably Roma, Medieval 2, maybe Warhammer 2, because I put a lot of hours into that since I actually did my series. I really think Warhammer 2's very, very solid indeed. Or one of the old Advance Wars games. Something of that nature. Basically, I like going to my comfort food games where I know them so well, I can sort of just do it on autopilot. So, yeah, find a game you know very well and try that, I'd recommend, Jacob. And I am sorry to hear it didn't go well, though maybe it went better than you think it did. John, what are your thoughts on the Outer Worlds being exclusive to the Epic Games Store for the first year? Honestly, this one didn't really bug me at all, because it's really, like, exclusive in the very loosest sense of the word, which is you can also get it through the Microsoft Game Store on PC. So if you don't actually want to have Epic, you can just get it through the Microsoft Game Store. And if you don't want it on PC at all, it's on console. So you've got PS4 and Xbox One and the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro. Those versions both run very, very nicely indeed. So, yeah. Honestly, it doesn't bother me at all, and generally, like, Epic exclusivity doesn't really bother me at all in general, but this one in particular, because it's not even that you can't get it on PC without the Epic Game Store. You can get it through Microsoft. It's available on PC through another way, so yeah, that one just doesn't really fuss me in the slightest, and I've not really seen much in the way of chatter about it. Like, when it was first announced a long time ago, a bunch of people were like, oh yeah, well that's a no-buy from me, because it's on the Epic Game Store. But yeah, when it actually came out, I didn't really see, like, any chatter whatsoever about people not buying it, and by all accounts it's done very, very well indeed. So yeah, honestly, for me it was a bit of a nothing thing, and it sounds like it was that for a lot of people too. I think the outrage over the Epic Games Store is starting to fade away. It kind of peaked with the Ooblets thing a few months ago, and since then it's just sort of been, yeah, drifting off. I'm really seeing much less outrage about that sort of thing than I used to. John, the Sunday slot is currently used for Fallout-related stuff and video essays. Does that include non-Fallout video essays, like, for example, Mass Effect 3 is better than you think? Possibly. Because it's not just Fallout. Yeah, Fallout-related stuff, and I could stretch that to be quite wide, really. Because Wasteland isn't really Fallout, but it's connected to Fallout. In theory, in future, an Outer Worlds series of some description could go on a Sunday. That would strike me as perfectly fair. A different Obsidian game, like Alpha Protocol, that could go on a Sunday. That'd be perfectly fair. Arguably, like, anything by Obsidian that they made roughly around the same time as New Vegas, that could, in theory, go on a Sunday. I'm willing to be pretty fast and loose with that. So, never say never, but Mass Effect 3 is better than you think would probably be a big single Saturday video by itself, if I had to guess. John, with Fallout 4 You Only Live Once incoming, have you been playing the game to keep your eye in? A little bit, yes, mainly just doing testing around mechanics for the time being. I kind of want to do just, like, one last run across the entire map with the game just set to very easy mode, just so I can basically go area to area, just double check there's nothing I've missed in terms of enemy placements, enemies spawn locations for random events, that sort of business. But for the most part, I'm feeling pretty comfortable because I don't have these things being overplanned. I think they're better if there's an element of tension and improvisation and me coming up with the exact plan area to area. So they're going to be planned, but not like over-planned. It's not going to be like robotic, where I know exactly what I wanted to do every step of the way, which you can't really do, because the combination of possibility of rad damage and possibility of real damage, that's going to completely change the order you do things. So it's going to be planned out in a very high-level kind of scheme sort of way. It's not going to be planned out in absolute detail, and I think as a series, it's going to be stronger for it. But yeah, absolutely, I will be doing another little bit of just a quick run-through, just to make sure I'm familiar with all of the triggers, all of the faction interactions, all of the enemy locations, all of that good stuff. John, if you could have a discovery mode as in Assassin's Creed in any game, regardless of whether it's set in a real-world location or not, what would it be? Interesting. Very interesting. So when I first read this question, I thought you meant like, real historical periods. But no, you mean discovery mode, but yeah, actually in a game. So like an in-game universe I'd like to learn more about. Okay, Skies of Arcadia as a starting point, because it's one of my favourite universes in-game. That'd be great. Mass Effect as well, like the original Mass Effect trilogy, because that's a fascinating universe that doesn't feel like it was ever, like, completely explored, which is why I think they made a bit of a mistake setting Andromeda in a whole new galaxy, rather than just saying, you know what, there's the Traverse, there's all this area that's technically outside Council space that we kind of nipped into a bit during Mass Effect 2, but was never properly explored. Why not just have a game that's happening at the same time as the original Mass Effect franchise, but set in the Traverse, where things are a lot more, dark and seedy and criminal, and there's not the presence of the Citadel or the Council or all that good stuff. That might have been fun, because tonally, it would have been very, very different, and you could do it like an inverted Mass Effect 2, where occasionally you do the odd mission back into civilized space, but only briefly, because technically you're a criminal or a smuggler or something, so you're not really supposed to be there, so that would have been fun. I think that would have been more interesting. So yeah, I'd love one in Mass Effect and Skies of Arcadia. Ooh, a back-end question here. I do enjoy these. How does MATN as a business interact with the MATN Patreon? Is it a donation or income or what? Technically it is just income, because, it is literally income, and we have to pay tax on it. So it is simply declared to the UK tax authorities as income, and we pay tax on it as income. Except, of course, because the business is holding it, you don't pay like normal pay-as-you-earn taxes on business income. Like, Patreon pays MATN as a business, which has its own bank account, and that bank account pays me and Claire. So we pay the normal pay-as-you-earn taxes on that at that point, and anything that's left over in the business is subject to business taxes. So yeah, basically it is just income that's treated like any other business income whatsoever. John, can't wait for the rest of the Obra Dinn series. Good point. I need to squeeze that in at some point. So we'll squeeze in that on a Wednesday at some point or another after we're done with the Outer Worlds. Good reminder. Are there any other games on the list that might get a longer look on the new schedule? Well, I did mention, Pokemon Sword and Shield a little while ago, so that's possible. And obviously Mount and Blade Warband, which I would like to just occasionally dip back into. So I'd say those are two good candidates for getting more attention than they might have done under the old schedule. John, in the Impossible Run, how do you think things would have gone if you hadn't got the Head of Zarklan or Glory to Zarklan? So here's how I suspect that would have gone. I probably would have lost the South ultimately to the Spukshalaks, but I would have been able to hold them at the junction to the area with, the black hole, where we ultimately had a large part of our infrastructure, where our first city planet was. So that would probably have happened, but if we hadn't had the fleets to ward off the Hull Fassans, they would probably have attacked. Because, we tossed garbage over each other's fences for a while, but we never actually went to war, if I recall correctly, aside from a very brief war where I just took the ruined ring world off them. But it was a very minor, quick affair that I chose to begin, and it was thanks to Zarklan. Had we not had the Zarklan fleets, I suspect they would have attacked us and we would have lost more territory. Now, we probably would have survived, but the problem is, every second I'm fighting them and falling back and having to redraw new boundaries, I'm not expanding, I'm not growing, I'm not getting better. So as a result of that, we would have been much weaker when the crisis did show up. We probably wouldn't have been ready for it. So while by the time the crisis showed up, the fleets of Zarklan were largely redundant and were actually among our weaker fleets, had we not had them in the early mid-game to build a foundation and an economy that actually built those stronger fleets, yeah, I think either we would have just straight up lost to the Spukshilaks and the Hulfasant, depending on how early the Spukshilaks went Xenophile, because they pivoted to Xenophile at one point. So at that point, they would have become more friendly to us. So, yeah, I don't know, but I suspect we would have lost to the crisis had we not actually had the fleets of Zarklan to hold off neighbouring threats in the early mid-game. John, Crusader Kings 3 thoughts. I think it's looking really positive. And it's looking very, very positive indeed, because it looks like a large amount of stuff that isn't in the Crusader Kings 2 base game, but is instead tied to certain core DLC, like Way of Life and stuff, is just going to be in Crusader Kings 3 from the start. So a bit of stuff's going to be missing. I think they've said, some pagan stuff and republics are not going to be in the game at launch. But it feels like, yeah, Crusader Kings 3 is going to be a polished, improved foundation that's going to actually be Crusader Kings 2 plus a pile of DLC. So they're not just going to be reselling us the same stuff that we've already bought, which is very, very positive indeed. And yeah, I think it sounds like they're moving in the right direction. From the statements they've made about like the ethos that's underpinning the design, I'm feeling good about it. Though obviously we don't know much about it yet, so I'm going to wait until, we've got some more information before I try and judge. In terms of a wish list, I think I mentioned this on Twitter if I recall correctly, I would like a better system of intelligence, because the one thing I really don't enjoy in Crusader Kings 2 is the character list, by which I mean I do enjoy it too much. It's way too powerful a tool for the player. Because if you're just like looking at, breeding a perfect dynasty, you can just say, oh, look over there, on the far side of the world, in a country I know nothing about and I've had no dealings with whatsoever, they've just had a daughter who, despite the fact she's 2 years old, I know is predestined to become a genius. So I guess we'll just get engaged now, so when she comes of age, we'll ship her over here and we'll start popping out genius children. Hooray, I've just bred genius into my family and dynasty, and that's weird. Like, how would you know that? Like, even if the child was inside your own empire, how would you know that? So I feel like there should be a system of, like, intelligence, where within your own empire, you have a pretty solid idea about people, but even then, children aren't, like, born predestined to be strong or genius or whatever. They have potential to be. And that becomes more or less certain as time goes by. Like, the probabilities start to firm up. So you can, like, when a child's, like, 5 or 6, you might start to get a view that they are likely to become a genius, or may become a genius, but until they come of age, you don't actually know for certain. And as you go further and further away, your information about other empires gets less and less and less. So your neighbours, you might have a vaguely solid idea, but people on the far side of the world, you've got no clue whatsoever. But as you do more trade with other empires, the amount of information you have about their important people goes up. If you send your spy master over, you can actually set him a specific mission to, like, spy on noble houses to get you a good idea about people of interest you might want to lure over. That sort of thing will be fun, because right now it's kind of weird and it gets in the way for me of the role-playing, which is why in my series I tried not to use the character list too much. That, yeah, you just sort of have omniscient godlike powers of just knowing what every single significant person in the entire world is like at a glance, which doesn't make sense and isn't really true, or, like, even today, that wouldn't be accurate. Like, I can't just figure out what someone's like on the far side of the world today, even if they were on social media, and I was too, because people sometimes give false accounts of themselves, and that should be included in the game in some capacity. And maybe you could do that to your own family too. So, like, if you've got a really disappointing son, you could dedicate some resources, or your spy master, or creating rumours that actually he's a secret genius in order to marry him off to someone higher than he'd be able to marry normally. But of course, once it turns out he's an idiot, there might be a bit of a backlash. That'd be fun. I'd like some system of, like, intelligence and deception pertaining to character skills. So you don't just marry the genius woman in order to get genius children. Instead, you're playing with knowledge and probability and mind games. That'd be a lot more fun to my mind. Any plans for any speculative videos like you did for Fallout 4? Interesting. Not at the moment. I'm gonna wait until Paradox do something first. Like, I'm gonna work under the assumption at some point I will have access to privileged information relatively early on, because I've got a very good relationship with Paradox. They always send me the new stuff before it comes out under NDA. In all fairness, I literally got Imperator early so I could actually make the flipping tutorials. So, me and them have got a good relationship. So, whenever I, have any information that would be worthwhile, I'll do it. But what I really don't enjoy doing is making, clickbait stuff where it's just random speculation where there's no basis to it whatsoever. And I feel like, if I just made a wish list, that'd be largely baseless. So, yeah. I'll wait until I've actually got some information before I make any videos about Crusader Kings 3, I think. John, where is RimWorld in the calendar? I know you were planning on revisiting it. Has that changed since you rejigged things? No, it's still floating around. It's together with Kenshi and Space Engineers are examples of big videos I think would be really big and really cool. So they're videos that are probably going to be coming up on a Saturday at some point. I don't know precisely when, maybe before the end of the year, maybe just into January when the release schedule calms down a bit. So those three should be coming up soonish. John, I recently checked the Many a True Nerd website and saw that John Says Stuff hasn't been updated in some years. Okay, so the reason for that is I started using the community tab on YouTube, which previously I never bothered with. But then I figured, actually, if I have just quick updates or want to put a poll up for what a video or a live stream is going to be, that's actually a much more convenient place for it. So, yeah, that doesn't really have much of a function right now. It's there in case I ever want to do anything. It's there, so that's nice. If I ever do want to, write a little essay to, explain a point I made or something, it's nice to know it's an option, but I have no particular plans to actually make use of it besides it's just sort of there. How do you feel about Matt calling out exactly what Fallout First was going to be on the first podcast? I'm going to need to look back on that. If you mean in the old... No, you can't mean in the old podcasts. Hang on, did Matt call that in the... Wait, when was the podcast that we brought back in relation to when Fallout First was announced? Okay, Fallout First was announced on the 23rd, the podcast returned on the 22nd. Now, I'll need to go back and listen to whatever it was Matt said, but bear in mind, even though Fallout First was announced on the 23rd, Bethesda had announced before that point there were going to be servers, they were going to be paid. So, Matt is not in fact a magic prophet, though I may need to go and listen to exactly what it is he said, because I can't remember exactly what phrasing you're referring to. But, yeah, Bethesda did announce some of what Fallout First was going to be ahead of time. Plus, it is extremely similar to their paid offering in Elder Scrolls Online, so he's not that much of a magic psychic man. John, do you have any daylight saving time horror stories? No, not particularly, though I do have a bit of a horror story that recurs every year when I forget how to change the oven clock, which is currently still wrong, because I can't remember how to change it. John, since the Outer Worlds gives a lot of freedom for melee, do you think a no-gun series is possible in the future? I think it's very possible, because, if you look, say, at the defense and block skills, the game's clearly set up for it, and, I think it would work just fine. I just don't know whether it would be interesting, because it's not that much of a challenge, I don't think. I think the game's well set up to give melee characters a lot of an advantage, so maybe more of, a special or a mini-series than a brand new series. I mean, I guess it could sync up with, the Supernova, so, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe. I haven't really thought about, when or if I might do some bigger, more difficult challenge runs for the Outer Wilds. I mean, the nice thing is, because it's a bit more of a smaller, compact game, it's not too difficult to do a challenge run on it, because it's not such a commitment. You could comfortably say, if you're going to be cutting out large parts of the story because people have already seen that, and that's included in the first series, that means you can actually make, pretty fast progress, all things considered. So it would not be a massive commitment at all. So, that's a possibility, certainly. John, what are your thoughts on Cato the Younger? Oh yeah, just give me the easy ones, why don't you? Right, so, how to sum up a man as complex as Cato the Younger. So, okay. Overall, probably good. He was a good person. Thumbs up. I mean, by all accounts, as far as I can recall, he was, a good commander. He was liked by his men. Firm Republican. Very stubborn. Unquestionably, if he had a weakness, he was very, very stubborn indeed. And, as many people who were tied to the Republican cause were, Roman Republicanism is also tied up with aristocracy, so that leaves a bit of a taste in the mouth today, these days too. So not an uncomplicated legacy, but basically history remembers him well. And that's good. He got a good hearing from historians at the time and historians going forward as well. Yeah, he was basically a good guy. For those of you who don't know, by the way, this was basically one of Caesar's big opponents. Not necessarily that effective on the field by the time the Civil War came out, and ended up taking his own life rather than allowing himself to be captured by Caesar and shown clemency, because Caesar would totally have shown him clemency, because clemency was basically weaponized by Caesar, as I have discussed in a previous Patroncast. So, yeah, a stubborn but dedicated Republican servant. Overall, thumbs up. Hey John and Claire, when are you getting a dog and naming it Paddy? No. What I want to do is name my dog Ajax. So when he's a good boy, I can say, oh, who's a good Ajax? Who's a Telamonian Ajax? And then when he does something wrong, like weeing on the rug, I can say, bad Ajax. Ajax, son of Oileus. That's a classics joke and it's very funny. John, if you could have one Marvel character and one DC character swap places for a year, who would you choose and why? I'll go for Deadpool and The Flash. Because I feel like The Flash would enjoy being in the MCU. Because, you know, it's a much more colourful, chirpy, happy-go-lucky universe. So it kind of suits him. So I feel like The Flash would actually get on really well in that universe. And Deadpool would just enjoy being in the DC universe, even though he has already acknowledged the existence of the DC universe inside Deadpool 2, if I recall correctly, just because it gives him a whole new universe to make fun of. So yeah, I think he'd have fun there. Though I suspect at the end of it, they might not necessarily want to change back. They might just choose to make the switch permanent. Also, can you and Claire do your best impressions of each other? So, this is my impression of Claire, doing my best to impersonate her tone and cadence.
Good afternoon, patrons. I've got a plan. It's going to work great. It's going to be marvellous. But that was unfortunate.
John, what would you do if you woke up one morning and found 3 years of garlic naan on your doorstep? Okay, to clarify this point from the podcast, I'm not saying deliver 3 years of garlic naan in one go. I'm saying every evening, just as you're starting to get a bit peckish, the doorbell goes and a brand new, fresh, hot, fluffy garlic naan arrives, alright? It's much better than what you're suggesting there. John, if you could choose one game concept to make into a new genre of sub-game, what would it be? Oh, I know exactly what I want for this one. I want a game where you don't actually play, you try and train up an NPC to play on your behalf. Like, I think this was a system back in... Was it Dual Heroes? There was a fighting game on the N64 with this, where when you actually took them into a training mode, they couldn't do anything. But, like, if you actually fought them, they learned to copy your moves. And then you basically set them loose on a different AI, and then basically tried to see if they could win. And then you just kind of taught them more moves to make them better and diddly-diddly-dee. Because I really enjoy making videos where I'm commentating the AI fighting itself. Whether that's like, you know, two sides in a total war battle, or Beast Battle Simulator when we did the Beast Battle Simulator World Cup. That was absolutely bloody great fun. Or when we do the Worms Armageddon Political Simulation Specials. One of those coming up because we've got a general election soon. That's going to be good. I love that sort of thing. So I would love a game where it was a massive, big, complicated universe, but you don't actually play it yourself. Instead, you just try and teach the AI how to play on your behalf. And you're taking on AIs that other people have been trying to teach. It would just be great. I'd love something like that. What game genuinely scares you? Honestly, because I'm a wuss, like, even really cheap jump scares work really well on me. So, like, I couldn't play Five Nights at Freddy's, even though it's the cheapest of all cheap jump scares, where it's just loud, noisy thing gets up in your face. I still wouldn't enjoy it and would find it terrifying, which is why I've never played it. John, do you have any plans to look at Fallout 4 New Vegas or Fallout 4 Capital Wasteland, to the two mods in development to try and, recreate Fallout 3 and New Vegas in Fallout 4? Now, the question here says when they come out. Oh, that's a big when. That's a really, really, really big when. That's an if, as far as I'm concerned, because these projects, where you try and actually take, like, a game and then build it again in a different engine, they have a habit of, like, you know, being in development for a decade and then never actually coming out, in my experience. So, yeah, that's a big if. Like, if they do ever actually come out, I'll give them a look-see as a one-off, absolutely, but I wouldn't put money on it actually happening. John, how important is historical accuracy for you in a video game? Honestly, not so much, because, well, okay, that question presupposes we can really have historical accuracy, because to some extent we're always going to be groping in the darkness when it comes to the past. We can come up with a vague idea for what we think is the most feasible scenario, but at the end of the day, we're never going to know for certain. We're just going to have a best guess. So I'm happy as long as a game makes sense and doesn't go off into the total flipping ludicrous, like Rise Son of Rome did. That was just completely flipping ludicrous. But yeah, I'm perfectly happy with games basically saying, you know what, we'll look at what we broadly think is true in history, and then we'll build something on a reasonable foundation, but we're happy to take liberties to make a game function correctly. Because absolutely, Total War 3 Kingdoms takes a few liberties for the sake of making a really solid game, and I'm perfectly happy for them to do that. That's all absolutely fine. Though on the other side of that coin, I do like it when we actually get a version of events that do seem to be well researched, especially if they come from an interesting point of view. Like, the reason I really liked Warsaw is because it came from a Polish developer, so it was really cool to actually get a take on the Warsaw Uprising from a Polish dev team, because it almost certainly matters to them more than it does to me personally, so their perspective on it was fascinating. John, if there was going to be another Total War crossover game like Total War Warhammer, what franchise do you think would work most well with the format? I've said it before and I'll say it again. Give them the Star Wars license, let them make Total War Empire at War, alright? Because Empire at War was a bit of a flawed gem. Let the Total War guys have a crack at it, it'd be magnificent. John, I remember in the Mass Effect 2 Insanity run, you said that the Normandy Reborn was one of your favourite cutscenes of all time in games. What else would make the list? Okay, like many cutscenes in Xenoblade Chronicles, because the voice actors there were flipping giving it their best, alright? That game is in some ways carried by the incredible voice acting. It really makes it work. It takes what would just be a good game and makes it into an exceptional one, because the voice actors are just doing flipping work. Because, like, okay, I'm not going to be precise because spoilers, but the cutscene just before the Mechons leave the colony at the beginning of the game, you know the one I'm talking about if you've played the game, and just after you've come out of the ether mine, the confrontation and reunion that happens there. Yeah, good stuff. Very, very good stuff indeed. And this one's more of a personal one, really. I'm sure it looks very scruffy these days. But Ganon's castle collapsing at the end of Ocarina of Time, and then Ganondorf re-emerging and becoming Ganon proper, kicking off the final fight. That's a brilliant little cutscene right there. I love that one. John, with the Fallout First program, many bugs, delays to Wastelanders, many other things, is Bethesda trash? Is the question. Well, okay, that's a massively oversimplified question to a very complicated issue. Bethesda have made some massive, massive missteps. Absolutely, and every time they've had an opportunity to row back and think, you know what, let's rethink this a bit, they seem to have dug a little bit deeper. Wastelanders might turn out to be okay, we just don't know yet. I have no information about that whatsoever beyond what you do, but no. I wouldn't say Bethesda as a whole is trash, because Skyrim is still brilliant and we don't know what's going on with Elder Scrolls 6 right now. Starfield we don't know anything about. They have made one very flawed game that they have made a huge pile of mistakes about. But before that point, they made Fallout 4, which I happen to think is really, really damn good. They made Skyrim, which I think is really, really damn good. This is a very unfortunate dark period in their history, but one bad game and a series of bad follow-up decisions does not make an entire company trash, no. John, as much as I enjoy the Outer Worlds, I get a bit bored of the visit new city, ask around for quests, do quest loop you find in modern day RPGs. What are some modern RPG tropes you'd like to see retired? I'm getting a bit bored of how many numbers there are in some modern RPGs, and the Outer Worlds is guilty of this a little bit, with every weapon having both a level and a variant. So, like, you know, you've got the basic weapon that has levels on it, and then you've got the Mark II of that weapon that's also got levels on it. So yeah, there's a lot of numbers and leveling and degradation and whatever. It just kind of adds more faff in the game than I think needs to be there, because of course, you know, New Vegas had weapon degradation, but it didn't have leveled weapons, and it didn't really have variants of those weapons getting progressively stronger outside of a small number of unique variants, which were very special and had unique effects. But in Outer Worlds, there's a lot more of that between, yeah, the weapon leveling and the different marks of weapons. So, yeah, there's a bit too much of that. Sometimes there can be too many numbers in games. I don't want to be dealing with that many numbers. I feel like it could have done with a little bit of streamlining and simplification into one single system. John, I'm a massive science nerd, and I've noticed that you seem quite knowledgeable about random, sometimes obscure science topics, yet completely ignorant on others. how does this happen? Right, so basically, I very often find something that I don't know that I find interesting, then I get totally obsessed with it and like read huge amounts about it online, trying to learn as much as I can, and then I just kind of move on to something else. So like, I have really in-depth bits of knowledge on very, very narrow random areas all over the shop, and then no knowledge whatsoever on general science, because I never really had much of a science education. I dropped the sciences fairly early on when I was in school. So yes, I know a small number of things in a huge amount of detail, and a large number of things not at all. My knowledge is very patchwork. Alright, a couple of recommendations of a few questions here. So, some of these I'm not familiar with, but Age of Mythology, that's a spin-off from Age of Empires, isn't it? Yes, I would likely look at that at some point, because Age of Empires is doing the rounds again soon. So, yeah, we'll probably be looking at that at some point. That'd be a fun little retrospective to do. And Alpha Protocol, as I did mention earlier, that might be a fun thing to feature in some capacity on Sunday in the vaguely tangentially related to Fallout slot at some point or another. We shall see. And someone else's recommendation, Stationeers. Yes, I remember seeing this, and I thought it looked good. But then I never really heard anything from the devs, and I think it did come out. We just never heard about it. They didn't do much in the way of PR. It was one of those games that launched so quietly, I never even realised it had come out. So, yeah, at some point I will want to give that one a look-see, because it was looking promising when I saw it one time at EGX Rest, I believe. John, as a Fallout and Paradox fan, are you aware of the Old World Blues mod for Hearts of Iron 4? I absolutely am, but you can't really play a total conversion mod until you understand the base game, and I don't understand the base game of Hearts of Iron 4. So I will look at it at some point, but it needs to be sometime in the future, because first I need to learn the Hearts of Iron 4 base game, and then learn how to play the game with the various DLCs that people consider absolutely essential, without which it's not a complete game, and then we need to introduce the total conversion and all its unique rules, so you can't just dive into a total conversion mod, no matter how much you like the sound of it, because you need to have the foundation of knowledge upon which to build. So, at some point, yes, but don't expect it for a long time. John, have you had any sort of backlash from the community as part of the new schedule? Not really, people have been very positive. Though, one that I found absolutely flipping hilarious was, there was a comment on the Mario Party 4 video, where someone was like, oh god, so John's going to be doing nothing but old Nintendo games now then. It's like, okay, that's a fascinating conclusion to draw. Right flipping there. So I've made about, 2,500, 3,000 videos over the past 6 years. Maybe 5 of them have been Nintendo games, and you've immediately jumped under the assumption on this 5th video out of 3,000 that's a Nintendo game, that from now on it's going to be nothing but super old Nintendo games. That's a fantastic conclusion right there. Bring this man a pattern, because he's clearly brilliant at recognising them. So yeah, that was my favourite bit of criticism and backlash. A completely random out of nowhere comment that was just utterly baseless. I love random baseless backlash and accusations. Those are my favourite kind. John, is Fallout 76 better than we think? Probably yes, just because some people have got a little bit hyperbolic on it. Like, I don't think it's a terrible game, I just think it's an okay game with some very mediocre bits, and some bits actually work pretty well. I think Nuclear Winter's pretty solid, I think the map's actually pretty good, the gunplay is pretty solid. There's stuff in there that's perfectly serviceable, there's stuff in there that's just average, there's stuff in there that's most definitely mediocre, especially technically. But some people act like it's literally the worst game they've ever played, and like, it's not. There are like a huge number of vastly worse games coming out on Steam all the time. So I think just on the fact that some people have got a bit hyperbolic on this, Fallout 76 is better than you think, but that's only because the actual baseline for what a lot of people think about it seems to be very low indeed. John, how long did it take you to understand Medieval 2 Total War? I revisited it recently with England and got into a lot of debt and had virtually no agents on the field. I honestly can't remember because, yeah, that was a game I learnt and fell in love with long before I was a YouTuber, or really before YouTube was a widespread thing. So I played it a lot. Not as much as Rome, but a lot. Basically, hundreds of hours of playtime. That's how I know Medieval 2 Total War so well. But because that was actually pre-Steam, this was just an old CD copy, I have no way of verifying how many hundreds of hours. Probably mid to high hundreds. Also, will you do a series on the Kingdoms expansion? Absolutely, because Medieval 2 Total War has, to my mind, the most generous DLC package that was ever created for a Total War game, with 4 different full campaigns, all of which had their own very interesting mechanics attached to it. Probably Barbarian Invasion is still my favourite DLC campaign, but the fact that in Kingdoms you got 4 different ones, especially the New World one. The New World one is really, really damn good, as is the English one. So, yes, at some point or another, yes we will. John, if you offered a job to research any time or place in history, but it couldn't be Europe or the Mediterranean, would you accept it, and when would you choose? You know what, I've been really, really interested in Chinese history ever since the Three Kingdoms thing came up. I've been doing a huge amount of reading and watching media around the Three Kingdoms period. So, just send me back in time to the Three Kingdoms. Wait, was there a time machine in your scenario? If there's a time machine, send me back there. I'd love to go and see what was actually going on. Because the thing about the Three Kingdoms period and Chinese historiography in general is it's a slightly odd thing. They didn't really have a concept of historiography. And in all fairness, that's fine because, yeah, for a large part of Greek history, they didn't really either until the later period when they started introducing some historiography. But yeah, like Chinese history, they just kind of put down, you know, stuff that probably did happen and stuff that's very fanciful and mythological and just kind of put it together in one source and don't seem to have a problem with that. And this went on for centuries and centuries. So it would be nice to actually see, you know, what the real deal was back then. That'd be fun. Suppose a girl came up to you and asked you the following: oh my god, you gotta check out these hella cool Excel sheets. What would you do? Marry that girl. I'm sorry, Claire, but I'd have no choice. I'm sure you understand. John, have you chosen a version yet between Sword and Shield? Yes, I'll be going for Pokemon Shield because I think the Shield legendary dog looks slightly less stupid than the Sword legendary dog. So we'll be going for the Shield one. That seems like the better one to me. As for starter, I'm not making a decision until I've seen what the final evolutions look like, because Froakie looks kind of stupid, but Greninja looks amazing. So, absolutely, I'm not accidentally ending up missing out on this generation's Greninja. Alright, I'm not making my choice till I've seen the final evolutions. John, do you think it would be better to watch the 9 episodes of The Outer Worlds before Christmas and then play it, or wait until after I get it for Christmas? Like, I don't want spoilers, but I really want to watch your series. Watch the first episode, because the first episode is pretty much just like setup. It doesn't really spoil anything, to be honest. It's purely the setup, stuff you could reasonably figure out from watching the trailers. So just watch episode 1 and then stop there, come back once you've played it yourself. That's probably a happy middle ground. John, what the hell is happening in the world right now? Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so The world's an interesting place at the minute. You know what? I'm going to answer this with an analogy, which is progress isn't a straight line. Progress has never been a straight line. Progress as a society and as a species and all the rest of it, it's never simple. It's never simple. Progress is a drunk person just trying to get home at the end of the evening, which is you're staggering around a bit. You don't just go straight there. You take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps sideways, you vomit in the gutter, few more steps forward, 1 back, lean on the wall, catch your breath for a second, try and get reorientated, few more steps forward, maybe fall over for a second, just take a deep breath, get yourself back up, few more steps forward. But the overall direction of travel is still generally positive. Right now, we're probably in a period where we're taking a step backwards and maybe vomiting in the gutter a bit, but progress tends to be forward regardless. In the long run, we're still making progress, hopefully. John, you get the opportunity to swap the gameplay styles of 2 game series for a pair of new games. What would you do? Total War and Mass Effect. So, in the Mass Effect turn-based campaign and real-time strategy sort of thing, you basically get to conduct a massive galaxy-spanning war against the Reapers and the Traverse and all the different factions and diddly-diddly-dee. But then again, probably the Reapers should show up at the end of the game as like the end game crisis, or like, you know, the equivalent of a barbarian invasion in a previous Total War game. Like earlier on, you're building alliances, there's like the System Alliance and the Council and all the other species have their own space, and there's the Traverse, which you can expand into, but it's super dangerous and diddly-diddly-dee. Then you've got like real-time strategy battles, which you zoom in for, and that's all real-time. That'd be really, really cool indeed. And that could be on the ground or in space. That'd be really, really... oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I want that. And then meanwhile, on the Total War side, now you're not actually being like, the god in the sky commanding things anymore. You're a soldier on the ground as part of an army. But the trick is, like a Total War game where all the players are being AI, it's not like structured, it's not predestined that one empire is going to do one thing or another. So you might one day be handling like, defense of a city just because by coincidence the AIs attack that city. Sometimes you're going to go on campaign, you're going to be out conquering in a foreign land, doing battles in the field, storming another city, all of that good stuff. And if you die, you respawn as someone else back in Rome. So you're kind of stuck in this quantum leap style scenario where you're trying from the lowest position you can be to actually help out your faction grow and stuff. And sometimes you're just going to lose and you just can't do anything about that. So you might have to consider, do I want to try and jump ship? And if another faction's doing better, you need to track down one of their diplomats who's literally an agent wandering around on the field. He might be located in a city somewhere, and try and arrange for you to jump ship over to another faction and get a new job and get retrained and actually, spend money buying new equipment. So if you want to join a phalanx, you've got to be able to afford the shield and the spear and the hoplite armor and all that good stuff. And if you actually want to become cavalry, you've got to be able to afford to buy and maintain a horse. Oh, this sounds amazing too. Make this happen, okay? I'm sold on both of these ideas. John, have you seen the game, in inverted commas, from a logistics company that models Roman supply chains? Yes, I saw this doing the rounds on Twitter the other day. It's a fun little thought experiment. I'll link to it in the description below if I remember. Claire, remind me to do that in case I forget. But yeah, there's a really fun thing. It did the rounds on Twitter the other day. It's basically just like a thought experiment about supply chains in the ancient world, but there's a sort of game thing attached to it. It's very, very interesting. John, my wife and I are planning a trip to Greece. I was wondering if you had any advice for where would be ideal to visit, especially places off the main tourist routes. I'm not sure it's completely off the main tourist routes, but as I was talking about during the Assassin's Creed Odyssey video, I love Epidaurus, the theatre there. I think it's just one of the most magical places I've ever been in my life. It's not exactly off the tourist route, but neither is it a major tourist destination, because it's not in or very close by to Athens. It's a bit out of the way there. So I would recommend that in Greece. Meanwhile, my little kind of hidden gem around Rome is the water gardens of the Villa d'Este, which tend to be not too quiet, and yeah, after you've spent a few days in Rome, which tends to be very hot, very busy, very crowded, it's lovely to just get away and enjoy the cool and the calm and the quiet. I love the water gardens of the Villa d'Este, they're wonderful. And more recommendations, this time for London. Okay, well obviously, we've got all of the free museums, so say British Museum is free and that's spectacular, and there's always some really, really interesting special exhibits you could pay a bit more to visit if you want to. You can very happily spend an entire day in the British Museum without going to any of the paid stuff though. It's a very good free day. My favourite of the little museums that people don't know as well is the Museum of Surgery. It's a very, very interesting museum indeed. I think I've mentioned this before in the Patroncast. It's a great little place. It's not massive, it's very small, but it tends to be very quiet, and it's absolutely fascinating. John, you've mentioned in the past your preference for third-party controllers due to preferring certain layouts, and in the Mario Party video, you said your controllers weren't rumbling. Do you have Franken controllers for the GameCube too? No, because that Mario Party video, as you probably guessed from the high resolution and the slight pop-in around the edges, was actually produced using Project Dolphin. All the games we've got for Project Dolphin are my own copy, so it's all 100% legit. But yeah, that game was actually emulated. So we were both playing on Xbox controllers. And for whatever reason, the Dolphin emulator just didn't acknowledge the rumble feature in the controllers. So yeah, the game thought we had access to rumble, but the controllers weren't actually rumbling, which is why we couldn't really do, say, the fishing game. Because yeah, the game didn't put the exclamation mark up, because it thought the rumble was active, but there was no rumble. That's what went wrong there. And also a recommendation for Metroid Prime. Oh, I love Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime's great. Yes, at some point, absolutely. Now we've got Project Dolphin working. Though, yeah, we do need a bit of work on that to avoid the pop-in round the edges. So, yeah, needs a bit of work yet. But at some point, yes, absolutely. John, I promise this isn't me throwing shade, but have you ever played badly on purpose in a playthrough to increase the tension of it? Now, I saw this accusation a few times about Stellaris the Impossible Run. When containment of the Scourge failed, people worked under the assumption that me abandoning L-Space was deliberately making a bad move to actually increase the tension of the series. I can absolutely confirm now that is not the case. The reason I abandoned L-Space in the first place was I was working under the assumption that so many fleets were moving in that direction because there was like 2-3 million strength in Selnock floating around between the gateways and the L gates. I figured they were all coming. Now, if I'd moved every single ship I had into L space and all of those 2 to 3 million had straight away gone up to L space, my fleet would have been destroyed. I would have lost everything, and I never would have had enough money to rebuild the artillery fleet. My priority was saving the artillery fleets, and once the artillery's gone, there's no point leaving anything else because that would have been destroyed. So, evacuation was the only sensible thing to do, because I don't know whether the game would have sent absolutely all of it in at the same time, but you've got to bear in mind, when Selnock fell, there was 2 to 3 million Scourge strength just sitting in the system over that all moved in at the same time, and I saw it was all in one system. Had all of it gone through the gateway and the gateway simultaneously, that would have wiped out everything that I had, because even at the end of the game, when I had everything as strong as it could be and much more strength than I had at that point in the game, when I took on, 1.6 million, when I took on their final proper system and their final fleets, even though those guys were spread out, we won, but we took casualties. I would have been destroyed, potentially, if I tried to hold L space. So that was a real decision. It was not me playing badly or anything. And I'm surprised I saw that accusation so many times because, I did very clearly put on screen how many fleets were located in Selnock at the time. There was way too much strength for my fleets to have been able to have stood up to it. My corvettes would have been overrun because back at that point there was only one corvette screening force, and after that point it's nothing but strike craft and missiles hitting my battleships. I would have just died. So that was not me playing badly, that was intentional, but I did see that conspiracy theory a surprisingly large number of times. John, what do you have in mind for the upcoming Crusader Kings 2 run? It is almost certainly going to be the Byzantium Empire and trying to rebuild Rome. So, I'm still working on, the exact rule set, and I might make some changes to the start date or exactly who I'm going to start playing as, but it's most likely going to be Byzantium. John, what are your thoughts on the Outer Worlds in terms of story and gameplay? Okay, that's a bit of a big one. That's give a full review of the game. I might do a video, trying to discuss, my overall thoughts when I'm done with the series. But, for the time being, what I will say is, it's a very confusing game for me because, naturally, they played up the Fallout connection. So I went in expecting New Vegas, but in space. But it's very much not New Vegas in space. It's very, very different in terms of, tone and focus and size and all sorts of bits and pieces. In some ways, it feels more like Mass Effect 1. Fortunately, I love Mass Effect 1 too, so that's fine, and the aesthetic has actually got a little bit of the Bioshock Infinite about it, and the stealth feels a bit Dishonored. There's a lot of stuff in here. An awful lot of stuff. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. Gameplay, it's going to take me a bit more time to get to grips with how it all fits together, because I like it, but I can't explain 100% why yet, because it's got so many different things from all sorts of different influences. I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I think the actual weapon upgrade system might be a bit overcomplicated and a bit too much faff, where you've got to, use weapon parts to maintain your weapons, but you get weapon parts by breaking down other weapons, so after you've cleared out a battlefield, you need to go around it, find all the corpses, get the guns, break them down into the weapon parts in order to repair your disintegrating guns, and that slows things down a little bit, and then money. The economy needs a bit of work to my mind. I think the economy is a bit broken, which is you get so much loot and so much money, you're just flipping, swimming in money. Literally, at one point in an upcoming part of the Outer Worlds series, I just literally look at my inventory and say, where did all that money come from? Because I've got 5,000 more bits than I was expecting to have, just because the game throws money at you so quickly. I have no idea where that money came from. So, yeah, I feel like there's a bit of a problem with, say, the loot drop rate and the amount of speed you get money in. I feel like that should be toned down a bit. It makes the game a little bit too easy and full of faff. I personally would like to see the actual skill checks being raised a bit. Some of them, especially in the early mid-game, feel a bit low. It's a bit easy to pass them, so it feels like, something that only a character who's specialised in should be able to pass. But no, it just kind of feels like even a generalist character can pass the vast majority of skill checks, which doesn't feel quite right to me. I know this sounds negative, but I love it. I'm just focusing on, the bits that I'm not 100% sure on. And in terms of story, that, to my mind, much like the Mass Effect universe, is really riding on the characters. I think it very much depends on the characters in terms of, the NPCs you actually interact with, the faction leaders, the fact that they're interestingly written and well voice acted, which I think overwhelmingly they are, and your companions are an interesting bunch that you actually like, which I think they are. I particularly like Parvati, for example. Parvati's absolutely marvellous. So yeah, there's a lot here I like, but it's not perfect. There are absolutely issues, and I might make a video discussing what I think works really well and what I think doesn't work so well, because to my mind, The Outer Worlds in some ways feels like a foundation. So they've built this universe and this idea, but I think it needs to be expanded on. I'd like to see some big DLC campaigns that are big, traditional Obsidian New Vegas DLC style. So, you know, go to some more planets, find some new planets, nip over to another system, do something else over there. Something like that. It feels like it needs expansion to me. Like, in many ways, what I'm really looking forward to is The Outer Worlds 2. Now they've got the template down, I'd be really interested to see how they expand and build on it. So there's a lot I love. It's not perfect. There are some issues with it, but they're very small things. So overall, it's a really, really damn solid game. Whether it's going to be top of my games of the year, I'm not sure. It'll be in the top 10, absolutely, but I'm not sure it's going to be number 1. John, any chance we're going to see the new Stellaris Lithoids pack anytime soon, as it's the first ever race pack to have its own mechanic, eating minerals and not food? I was planning to, because it came out on a Thursday, and I said to them, if you could maybe give me early access on Wednesday, I could do, you know, one of my new Wednesday live streams about it. But sadly, there was no early review code available for it. So, yeah, at that point, The Outer Worlds came out, and that sort of ate everything. So, rather than actually doing a special on it now, I might wait till Federations comes out. Then, at that point, we might well feature the Lithoids at the same time as we're doing something for that. Are you planning to do any more dating sims anytime soon? There are none currently on the shortlist. I have a few on the long list that I might get round to at some point, but as we're right now in, like, you know, peak all the big games of the year come out period, yeah, it's not a good time for it. When we get into, you know, the quieter January, February next year time, then there's a possibility I might well have a Luxie at one, yes. John, how's you, Claire and Tabby? Me and Claire are fine. Poor little Tabby, we are still trying to figure out how to treat her upset tummy. So we're giving her all sorts of different foods and medicines and whatnot. She's fine, she's stable, we don't think she's in pain in any way. She's just, yeah, a bit of a fussy eater, so we need to find the right way to get the right medicine into her. But she's fine, she's getting better, certainly. And do you like the TV show Friends? I was never massively into it. My sister was super into it, but I was never hugely into it. Like, you know, if it's on in the background, I'd happily just, like, you know, have it there. I wouldn't turn off the TV. It's, you know, just fine as a bit of background noise. I never thought it was spectacularly funny the first time round. I'm not sure it's really aged that well. Some of the humour comes across as a bit dated and flat these days, to my mind, whenever I've seen like a rerun happening to be on TV or whatever. So I was never the biggest fan in the first place. Now it starts to resurface on, was it Netflix? I think it's on Netflix now. I certainly wouldn't be rewatching it anyway. Do you find it easier to do a co-op video with Claire or with other people? Okay, other people, but not for the reason you're thinking. The thing is, I really love making stuff with Claire, but because Claire doesn't actually do video game commentary, this isn't just a thing you can just, like, you know, sit down and do very easily. It takes a lot of practice for it to seem very naturalistic to you. So one of the kind of unfortunate things is, like, I saw a few people saying, like in the Mario Party 4 video, John, stop talking and let Claire speak. The thing is, and I'm not throwing any shade at Claire here whatsoever, because she's not an experienced commentator, her just kind of, like, you know, narrating what she's doing in a video game doesn't come as naturally to her as to me, because I've been doing it for 6 years and she doesn't do it at all. So therefore, if I was speaking less in Mario Party 4, then there wouldn't necessarily have been more Claire speaking, there might have been just more silence. So I did try and leave, like, pauses for Claire to say something and try and lead Claire into the conversation, but sometimes she didn't really actually say much, so as a result of that, in editing we just sort of closed up those gaps, for example. So it was a bit sad that I did see some people kind of assuming that what was going on there was I was just talking over Claire a lot, when it's just that I can much more easily keep talking than Claire can, especially as I was more familiar with Mario Party than she was. So she was focusing on a game she's unfamiliar with, doing commentary that she's not used to doing. So Claire was not in the easiest situation there. And that's why it can be easier to do it with other people who are actually experienced commentators, because then they're much better at, you know, keeping the dialogue going, filling those pauses, always being able to talk, which is why me and Dan and Matt can sit down in the podcast and with no plan whatsoever, just basically talk for 2 hours in a way that quite a few people seem to find entertaining, because we're all experienced commentators to some degree, so we're all good at bouncing off each other and all that good stuff. So yeah, I would say with other people, but not because I don't enjoy working with Claire, just because it can be easier to work with people who have more experience doing game commentary. And do you think Planet Zoo will come back as a live stream? No, I think Planet Zoo will come back as a video. Very soon indeed. I've got something planned for that, in fact. John, which noun is the best to put but spooky after? Sex. John, in this season of Spooks, I've been listening to quite a lot of the Magnus Archives, which deals quite heavily in the area of a small number of base fears, which all other scary stories and experiences fall under. What would you consider to be the base fears of humanity? Oh, you need to ask someone who's actually, a psychologist to answer that. I'm not qualified to answer that. The default easy answer I probably would go for would be oh, well, people are scared of the unknown. But that doesn't seem to be true at a fundamental human level. Because, kids, when they don't know anything, aren't scared of everything. They're idiots who need to be told to be scared of things. Like traffic and crossing the road and electricity and strangers and stuff. Kids fundamentally don't seem to be scared of much. Some might be. Some kids are super shy and super scared of stuff. But many kids are totally oblivious and don't seem to have a natural fear reaction to everything. So I guess just saying, oh, people are scared of the unknown is a cheap answer that doesn't really bear out. So I don't know. Sorry, this is a question I'm literally unqualified to answer. Maybe try directing it to a psychologist or something. They might know better. John, what would you say your RPG stats look like? I've always said I've invested heavily in intelligence, charisma, and luck. Because I sure haven't invested in perception. That's definitely true. I definitely have perception of 1 or 0, or whatever the lowest you can take is. 0 perception, and then on top of that, I accepted the flaw that gave me an extra perk point for even less perception. And if you could level up right now, what attributes would you boost? Totally speech. Just put everything into speech, because talking my way around a problem is a good thing. Because I suspect I'm not very useful in a fight. John, have you ever thought about continuing your Mass Effect no guns run? Honestly, in Mass Effect 3, I don't think it would work particularly well. That game's really built around the idea that you should be using guns, though. Admittedly, Mass Effect 2 was the game where you really kind of needed guns, just because of the layered armor where certain things worked better than other things. Mass Effect 3, yeah, you can be more effective as a pure biotic, though there is the annoying bit right at the end of the prologue where the ship won't show up to save you until your guns are empty. So you have no choice but to fire guns whether you want to or not, which is very, very irritating indeed. So yeah, I don't know. Honestly, Mass Effect 3, I'd probably do a smaller series, maybe highlighting Citadel, because I think Citadel is fantastic, and then a video essay, Mass Effect 3 is better than you think. Also, what's your opinion of the walk away ending of Mass Effect 3? I actually kind of like that one, because it just lets Liara have her little moment in the sun. Just because, the ending of Mass Effect being maybe you can't actually bludgeon or shoot the giant invasion of unstoppable, almost unkillable space squids to death, and as a result of that, you're going to lose. That's fine. I almost like the upbeat ending of, you know what, the cycle continues, but that's not a fundamentally bad thing, because if the previous cycle hadn't been ended by the Reapers, then there probably wouldn't be humanity, because the Prothean Empire would at some point have just come along and enslave them or whatever. So our universe wouldn't exist, and if the previous universe hadn't been harvested by the Reapers, then the Protheans wouldn't exist. So I wouldn't really be opposed to the canonical ending of Mass Effect 3 being, you know what? You did your best, you resisted well, but at the end of the day, the Reapers won. But that leads to a cycle of rebirth, and actually, Mass Effect 4 is set in the next cycle, and you could play, say, or, have a companion who, like Liara, is an archaeologist, where you discover what actually happened in the previous cycle. Now, that would actually be really interesting, because it would create a connection between the first trilogy and the next trilogy, and also it would lead to the suspicion, hey, is Mass Effect 6 going to end with actually defeating the Reapers, or much like Mass Effect 3, is the cycle going to continue, and as a result of that, there's just going to be, another trilogy, with each trilogy being in a subsequent cycle, digging up the remnants of the previous one, because that'd be fun. That'd actually be kind of nice, and I just like the fact that, yeah, Liara isn't about, let's just shoot the Reapers with a gun or come up with a massive super weapon that can kill them. She's like, hey, we might lose, so let's actually leave what we've learned for the next cycle so they can do better than what we did, just in case. So I think that's a nice ending. In a way, in some ways, it's actually my favourite ending. So yeah, I'm glad you actually raised that, because I do rather like it. John, I was wondering whether you would consider a slightly modded Stellaris playthrough, where the contingency is forced to spawn because you've never fought them. No, but what I am thinking is, next time I do Stellaris, I might well actually set up a mod, which means that all 3 of the Crisis endgames will spawn. Not necessarily simultaneously, but they'll all, like, be rolling in the background, so eventually all of them will show up, but we just don't know who's going to show up when, because that might be fun. That might be very, very fun indeed, so that's what I'm thinking for next time. John, I'm super excited to watch you playing Mount & Blade. Have you thought about mods with it? I don't really like touching mods until I understand the base game properly, because if you don't understand the base game before you install mods, you don't know what's actually base game versus what the mods change. Like, it's important to understand what the foundation was before changes get made, so you understand whether you actually like or want the mod going forward, because a mod might make, 9 changes I like and 1 change I don't like. But if I never actually played the game first without the mod, then I don't know that. I don't know that there's one system I'd prefer without a mod. So yeah, I need to learn the game without mods first. But absolutely, I want to look at the game and the DLC, and then I'll consider modding it. But I just need to learn the basics before I can do that. John, are you finding the choices in the Outer Worlds make you think, or do you know ahead of time what you want to do? Okay, I will answer that, but first, spoiler warning, obviously, very light minor spoiler warning, so just skip ahead a couple of minutes if you don't want any information about what happens on the first planet in the Outer Worlds. I don't know ahead of time what I want to do, but actually this is a really interesting point, so thank you for raising this. This is actually really interesting. One of my issues with the plot of the Outer Worlds is I find it a little bit too easy to decide what I want to do. Because the options I've been presented with so far seem to be, hey, there's some small independent people who don't want to fall under the heel of the corporation, or there's the corporation. Which of these two do you want to side with? And the problem is, the corporation is, one, very explicitly painted as evil. Like, they're very happy to just stand by as people are maimed and driven out and end up killing themselves and are made sick by poor food and diddly-diddly-dee. And on top of that, the corporation isn't even working. The corporate societies are failing. They're not doing well at all. And I think in some ways it's a bit of a shame that it's not more of an interesting choice. Because if the choice was between, say, hey, there's a bunch of independent colonists who don't want to be under the corporate heel anymore because they want to be independent, but actually their society is, struggling a bit because they don't have support from the corporations and the soil's not very good, but they're free and they're happy. They're mostly doing okay, but, they don't have access to medicine, say, so actually they do have health problems. Meanwhile, over in the corporate towns, actually, even though they've got no freedom and some people aren't happy with the corporations, actually they're healthy and they're well fed and they get good medical attention and they're safe from all the bad things in the wasteland. So the corporation actually is giving value to them. You can understand why they're actually siding with the corporation aside from just propaganda or whatever. So that would be more interesting because then it would be a difficult choice. Do you decide to back and support society, which is clearly struggling but is free and happy, or do you support an unhappy society that seems to actually be doing very, very well, at least insofar as people are being materially taken care of, but they're not free? That's more interesting, so I wish the corporations weren't overtly portrayed as actively evil. Now, I don't mind them being, evil if you were to dig into it, for example, but yeah, it's a bit too on the nose in some ways, so I personally didn't find the choice you have to make on the first planet particularly difficult, just because the corporation is presented as so flipping evil. John, Night Trap's been ported to the Switch. Will you make a Night Trap video? It might be fun as a one-off. It certainly might be fun as a one-off. It's probably the most famous and or infamous FMV game that's ever been made. So maybe, but no immediate plans. And speaking of that, any chance you'll play some more Not for Broadcast when it comes out in December? Yes, because that video did really well and I really enjoyed it. So absolutely, we'll be having some more Not for Broadcast, yes. Finally, any chance of Hitman contracts? Not anytime soon, but at some point absolutely, because Hitman always goes down so well. John, now you have the option to go back and finish games you'd like. How long is your backlog? Honestly, not spectacular. And actually, this feeds into the next question, which is about the multicolored calendar of doom. It's still looking a bit red, because when a brand new game comes out, that's very inefficient to put together. Because, like, normally, if I can just, like, say, render a video while I'm, like, having dinner and then upload it overnight, that's very efficient. But if there's a brand new game coming out, I need to get a video out the same day, then it needs to be, like, rendered and uploaded during, like, the afternoon. So I can't be using my computer during that time, and that's relatively inefficient. So we're a little bit behind right now just because of the Outer Worlds, but we're starting to catch up at the minute, so that's all absolutely a-okay. It's a little bit on the red side of the calendar right now, but it's more orange than it was. We're catching up. John, if you had to never change the clocks again, would you rather stay in summertime or regular time? Summertime. Keep it lighter in the evenings, please. Let's have as much light in the evenings as we can have. John, what hardware and software are you using to create and edit your videos these days? Very similar to how it has been before, to be honest. The computer is basically based around a sort of low mid-range i9 CPU, and a GTX 1080 Ti is the GPU. And in terms of software, PC capture is handled via either Shadowplay or OBS, and console capture is done with an Elgato HD Pro 60. So yeah, actually I've been using most of that equipment for quite some time. I think I've had this computer for a year and a half, 2 years at some point. It's probably due for an update at some point. I haven't run into a game where I feel like I desperately need a better rig just yet, but maybe going into next year, I might consider some upgrades. John, what is your favourite thing about the Outer Worlds? Parvati. It's Parvati. She's amazing. I love Parvati. Like, she is my favourite of all the, well, not Fallout companions, but I like her better than any individual Fallout companion, alright? Better than Veronica, better than Boone, better than anybody. Parvati is the best and I love her. John, after the live stream of Untitled Goose Game, I now hate geese so much I reserved one for Christmas dinner. Good, geese are delicious as well as annoying. John, how do you stay motivated to do things you love outside of your timetable? Oh, don't ask me, I'm literally the least qualified person in the world to answer that question, because I used to, like, do marketing as a day job and play video games in my spare time. Then I made video games my job, so now I just do that so much that Claire has to glare at me and try and tell me to take the odd day off and take a holiday for like the first time in years. So I am terrible about doing stuff outside of the timetable. The timetable is my god and I worship it and I just constantly slave in front of it. Seriously, I am totally unqualified to answer this question because I am terrible for just working all the time, as Claire will attest. So I'm so sorry, I cannot answer this question because I am literally terrible at precisely that. John, I've recently got my hands on a Vive and I love it. Any games you'd recommend but haven't featured on the channel? Honestly, for me, it's all about the rhythm games. So basically, yeah, any of the rhythm games are a pretty damn good time. Have I put Job Simulator on the channel? I can't remember if Job Simulator's been on the channel, but that's a fun little experiment. That definitely works pretty darn well. And Space Pirate Trainer is widely regarded as pretty much the best shooter. So that's well worth a look-see as well. John, do you like potato skins? Not particularly, to be honest. I like my potatoes in a variety of forms. I like some roast potatoes, I like thick cut chips, I like fries. I'm not so keen on the skins though, sorry. John, if you had a chance to pilot any large vehicle in the world, who would die first and how? Ooh, you know those like massive like spinning whir things? That's like a giant crane, but with like a big spinning digger thing on the end, like giant mining rigs or something. The thing that's in like the ash heap in Fallout 76, but there's like ones that are real. I want one of them, but I want it next to a city so I can like smash it into buildings, because that sounds hilarious. So basically the answer to your question is whoever was in those buildings, by me smashing them with a giant thing. John, do you think the decisions that Bethesda's made with Fallout 76 have in any way tainted the Fallout brand? Yes, but not irreparably. I think like the damage will be done if they don't very clearly learn lessons for Fallout 5. Which is, in some ways, actually, to my mind, a positive thing. Because I can't imagine when it does come to Fallout 5, they're going to be able to do anything other than very specifically flag that it's not like Fallout 76. They won't say that out loud, but it'll be the clear implication when they're actually announcing it. So they'll very clearly say, this is a single-player thing. It is going to be RPG-ish. We've brought back skill checks because people clearly like it. So I think their experience with 76, and in some ways, the experience of The Outer Worlds coming out, just 2 days apart from Fallout First, I think they're going to learn from that and observe it, and in some ways, the backlash against 76 is likely to make 5 move more in the direction of classic Fallout and Fallout 3. So I think it'll be very, very interesting indeed. If, however, they double down on it and Fallout 5 seems to have elements of 76 in it, at that point, yes, I believe the brand will have been irreparably tainted. And in terms of the future of Bethesda, well, it really depends what comes next, doesn't it? Like, if, as it turns out, Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield are both good, I suspect things will be forgotten and forgiven very, very quickly indeed. But it is really on them now to nail it in their next few games. Because if those two don't turn out to be good, yes, at that point the entire company is in trouble. John, last month you rated F1 drivers based on their names, so let's Canadianise that question, shall we? Take a look at this list of hockey players and try and figure out who are the best and who are the worst. Okay, I've got a list here, so I've got some faces and some names. So these are divided into forwards and defence. I'm not sure if this is like one team or something, I'm not sure. This might be like the Canadian national team. I think it's the Canadian national team. So what can we figure out about these individuals? Okay, so the serial killer is definitely N. Cousins. Alright, that smile, that is the smile of a serial killer right there. Meanwhile, P. Denault, he knows he wasn't involved, but he walked in afterwards, and it's kind of scarred him mentally. That's why he's got that slightly sideways, uncomfortable smile. Alright, he knows, and he's covering for Cousins as Denault, but he's not comfortable with it. He's not comfortable with it in the slightest. Who else knows? Oh, some of these people definitely don't know. Yeah, down in defence, they don't know. All the serial killers are up in offence, because down in defence, everyone's lovely. Like C. Folin and V. Meat, those are just nice guys, you know? They'll put on a party, they'll make sure there's a really good spread, they'll go around, make sure your glass is topped up. Good guys, like hanging out with them, great guys. Not S. Weber though, he's a misery guts, and they don't invite him to the parties. In fact, they don't even tell him the party's on, so they don't actually need to bother inviting him or not, because otherwise it would just be a little bit awkward. But yeah, up in offence, that's where the serial killers are, absolutely. Now, in terms of who's the best at hockey, who looks good at hockey in this group? It's going to have to be... Oh, yeah, C. Folin. C. Folin, I'd say, is very, very good at hockey. That is like a good beard for hockey right there. And in terms of the worst at hockey, probably has to be B. Gallagher. I just don't get hockey vibes off him. He looks more like a human resources assistant or something. John, have you ever watched or gotten into wrestling of any kind, like the WWE? No, I don't think it's as big a thing over here in the UK, and just I never really got into it. I mean, there definitely are people that watch it, because I know Dan and Matt have both been into it to varying degrees at some point, but I just never really watched any of it myself. Not really my thing, I'm afraid. John, are you considering playing Crusader Kings 2 again, even after Crusader Kings 3 comes out? Absolutely, and I think I may have kind of misspoken at one point or phrased things very badly there, where when I announced Crusader Kings 2, I may have implied that I wanted to get in a playthrough before Crusader Kings 3 came out, implying that after that happens, I'll be done with Crusader Kings 2. But as you're well aware, that's not how I operate. Like, you know, Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 are both out, but I still go back and look at Fallout 3 and New Vegas. And, like, you know, Warhammer 2 and Thrones of Britannia and Three Kingdoms are out in the Total War franchise, I still go back and play the old ones. So absolutely, I go back and play old games, and absolutely, there's every possibility we'll go back to Crusader Kings 2 even after Crusader Kings 3 comes out. The upcoming Byzantium playthrough is in no way supposed to be like a goodbye to Crusader Kings 2 playthrough, absolutely not. John, what does a typical day in your life look like? Okay, so, my timetable's a bit odd because I happen to just work odd hours, which is, I tend to end up working into, like, the evening. So I often go to bed, like, really stupidly late. Like, if you've ever seen, like, what time I tweet, you may notice I, like, might well be awake at, like, 2 a.m. or something. So I often go to bed at stupid o'clock, and thus I lie in a little bit, because, you know, I work for myself, so I set my own hours. So I kind of basically work a working day that's more in line with, like, say, New York's working day, for example. I often joke that I work on, like, New York time. So yeah, very often I'll get up a little bit late. By, say, I don't know, 11 a.m. or noon or something, I will be sitting down and I'll be recording. That could be for 3 hours or something. Take a lunch break, do some editing in the late afternoon, going into the evening, check over a few bits and pieces, get ready to release a video, make sure the channel's ticking over nicely, just, you know, keep an eye on the comments, make sure everything's as it should be, and so the cycle repeats. In fact, that's pretty much been every day for the past 3 years, broadly, with like the odd exception like Christmas. John, what event would you say truly marked the end of the Roman Republic? Historians seem to differ greatly on this. Yeah, I've never been convinced by this idea that we need to put like the end of the Republic really, really early. Like, I have seen the theory being put around that it's like the point of the Gracchi, but I think that's not right, because the Republic was not irreparably doomed with the Gracchi. Absolutely, things could have been pulled back and fixed up. So I feel like that's way too early. Like, I know it's a really boring, basic answer, but like, I personally think the most accurate and easy place to put it is just Caesar crossing the Rubicon. That's it, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I know, interesting arguments have been made for earlier than that. I'm basic in this regard. I just say the moment Caesar has officially invaded, that's the point of no return. Can I start a petition to have you referred to Parvati in the Outer Worlds as Harvati? Because we all know, no Havati, no party. No, you can't do that, because I'll forget what it is, because I need to actually look up that Havati is apparently a type of cheese. Claire probably knew that. She's the cheese expert of the two of us. And interestingly, when you actually search for Havati on Google, one of the prompts that actually shows up is, why is Havati so delicious? So clearly this is an excellent cheese, but I'm not familiar with it, so I will not be naming my beloved companion friend after an unknown cheese, no. John, would you rather play an official 3D remake of Fallout and Fallout 2, or retro isometric turn-based versions of Fallout 3 and New Vegas? I am going to say the 3D remakes of Fallout 1 and 2, for the simple reason that would add more, because the format of Fallout 1 and 2 is, it's a small number of areas you can actually explore, and then the rest of the wasteland is just a menu screen where you occasionally run into a random event. So if you remake that into 3D, you can't really do that anymore. You'd actually have to populate that area with stuff. So you'd have yourself a brand new wasteland, which would be new content. Meanwhile, if you were to take 3 in New Vegas and put them back into the old style, then a whole bunch of stuff would actually be lost. You'd make those games smaller. So just in terms of trying to get the most new Fallout content out of this thought experiment, I'm going to go with the 3D remakes of 1 and 2. John loved the recent Mario Party video, was wondering if we might see more of it, maybe as a podcast special. I have no idea if you can hook Project Dolphin up to the internet and get it to play with other versions of Project Dolphin. I don't know if that's even possible. Hang on, I'm going to check. Okay, the answer seems to be yes, but it's very complicated and technical, and also, yeah, everyone needs to have Project Dolphin set up identically with identical versions of the game as well. Okay, it sounds complicated, so possibly, but probably not in the podcast, because yeah, I think Dan foresees Season 2 of the podcast as just being a chatty thing, where we're not actually playing a game at the same time. John, have you ever had a look at Slime Rancher? No, but it has come up before in the Patroncast, so at some point I will give it a look-see, but I know very little about it aside from the fact it's well regarded. Are there any more ideas in the works for the MATN merchandise? I do have the only MATN hoodie in existence right now. The problem is it's a sample that I can't really take into production because it turned out to be really expensive to make. So yeah, you'd probably consider it overpriced even if we sold it at cost and made no money on it whatsoever. I would like to do more. There are a few ideas which once we get a bit more green in the calendar, I might be able to ask Claire to look into, where we were thinking of making some more experimental stuff and some more like, short-term things that refer to individual series while they're actually going on. Stuff like that. There's a few ideas floating around, so watch this space. We'll hopefully get that set up in the new year. John, since the Outer Worlds has mandatory damage at the start of the game thanks to that cliff, what would you do as an alternative to the Outer Worlds you only live once? Yeah, I hate that bloody cliff. It really bugs me. They've put unavoidable damage at the start of the game. It's really, really bloody annoying. So, yeah, I've no idea how we'd work around that. Maybe we'd just mod it to disable fall damage, and then I'd turn that mod off once I've made it past that cliff. I don't know. I mean, I think we need to mod anyway, because even if you've got determination set to minus, I think you get some health regen, don't you? I think you get some health regen. So yeah, that would be a problem. And also, don't you get... Wait, do you get health back for eating food? Okay, we need to mod the game regardless. So basically, we just solve it with mods. John, which is best for you financially? Sending money through Patreon or joining the channel using the YouTube memberships thing? absolute Patreon. Patreon takes a very modest cut. Google takes a slightly larger one. So absolutely Patreon is the best bet for us. So stick around here. You are doing us the world of good. When can we expect your Last of Us series? There's never been a better time. Actually, it is coming up at some point soonish because they just delayed Last of Us 2, didn't they? To, is it May now? I think they just delayed it a little bit. So absolutely, it's not a long game as I understand it. We will do a series on that before The Last of Us 2 comes out. You have my word on it. John, are you keeping up with the Ring Fit routine? Not exactly, but then I wasn't exactly expecting to. To my mind, the miracle bullet is going to be the Oculus Quest and Beat Saber, because Beat Saber is the only game that can trick me into doing exercise without even realising I'm doing it. So, me and Claire will treat ourselves to an Oculus Quest at some point, possibly at Christmas, and then we'll see, because I suspect that will work much better for us. John, was swimming up into a jellyfish the most unpleasant gaming experience for you this year? I think that may be my least pleasant gaming experience of all time. That was so horrible. I really hated that. I was not hamming that up. That was just the worst thing, because I'm really scared of jellyfish. I find them horrifying and really scary. So that was just, it was the worst thing for me. I found that such a horrible thing to do. So yeah, that was not fun. Then an anglerfish snapped at me. That was not a fun stream for me. John, now the Impossible Stellaris run is over, can you upload your custom Empire file? Yes, we will look into doing that. What Claire's going to do is she's going to look up how to do that, tell me how to do it, and then we're going to get those files and we're going to find a way to distribute them. Game recommendation for Star Sector, which I've heard of before, but I don't know much about beyond, very high level stuff. Described here as open world FTL. So at some point we will look into that, absolutely. And since it's October, what are your Halloween traditions, if any? Honestly, we don't really have any, because here in the UK, Halloween isn't so much of a thing. It's a much bigger deal in the US. In the UK, it's a very, very small thing indeed. Like, you know, maybe you might put out a pumpkin, but you wouldn't necessarily even expect trick-or-treaters. That's not a common thing at all. Like, maybe in some towns or some neighbourhoods, more so. But basically everywhere I've lived my entire life, you've never really seen much in the way of trick-or-treaters. Like when I was a kid, we would carve a pumpkin, but that would be like the limit right there, just because that would be fun. So, yeah, honestly, I'm afraid we are boring and British and have very few Halloween traditions. Once you're done with Fallout 4 is better than you think, will we be getting Fallout 76 is worse than you think? No, because I think, like, as I say, I think people are already a bit hyperbolically negative about it. Absolutely, it's not good stuff, but I don't think it's as bad as people say either. But in terms of, like, you know, talking about Fallout 76 and its problems, I kind of already did that. That's what Fallout 76, what went wrong and how to fix it was. So, if you're interested in that, go and check out that video. John, another Skies of Arcadia question for you. Which of the Gigas do you find the most interesting to fight? The first one, the red one, his name... Oh, what's his name? I can't remember what his name is. The red one that's like the heads coming out of the desert. For the simple reason that you don't actually ever defeat him. Because at that stage you're in two tiniest ships. You're just in like, you know, this tiny fishing vessel taking on this ridiculous, massive god. So you basically can't hurt it. So your only plan is to concentrate fire at it so it stumbles slightly while it's shooting and thus misses you. That's basically your only defense against it, which is, yeah, just marvelous. I like that as a setup for a boss fight, that you don't even consider the possibility you might be able to kill it. Your only objective is, okay, let's just try and knock it off balance so it can't murder us in one hit, which is a lovely setup for a boss fight. So yeah, that's got to be my favourite, really. Also, BBC Radio 4 recently had a feature about reimagining Greek myths for a modern audience. As a classicist, what's your opinion on rewriting ancient myths and legends to fit modern sensibilities? I am absolutely all for it, as long as that's not all you're doing, because the thing is, there isn't one version of these myths. Like, every character in Greek myth, there are multiple versions of the same story. Like, say, Helen of Troy. Most people are familiar with the version where she joins up with Paris, goes to Troy, the Greek armies come to pick her up, massive war, siege, diddly diddly dee. However, in Euripides' play Helen, Helen never went to Troy, because Helen was all chaste and virtuous and loyal to her husband. So the war had to happen anyway, so instead, like a cloud that the gods made look like Helen or something, went to Troy instead of her, and the gods whisked her away and just popped her down in Egypt, where her husband happens to run into her after the war's done. They get a happy ending, diddly diddly dee. Now that's a pretty different interpretation of the myth, right? That's very different to Helen had an affair with Paris, went to Troy. But those versions just happily sat alongside each other in the Greek mythic corpus. There were loads of different alternative versions of these myths. Like, if you were to say to someone in ancient Greece, hey, what is the story of this character? It basically wouldn't make sense, because they were constantly being reevaluated and remixed, specifically to do exactly what you're saying, to appeal to the sensibilities of the audience, whether it was remixed to make a political point or a social point, or to change the tone so something might be more tragic or more comic. These stories were constantly being remixed. The myths that we've inherited from the 5th century BC are just a tiny snapshot of an ongoing, evolving corpus of stories. So absolutely there is merit in trying to understand the exact context that those plays were produced and recreating that in a modern staging as closely as you can, but there is also merit in saying, what are these stories, what are these characters, and how do we tell that story in a way that would make a comparable point that is accessible to a modern audience in a modern culture. So absolutely, I'm all for it, because that's precisely what Euripides and Sophocles were doing back in the day. John, have you ever thought about trying to reach a wider audience by having Claire dub your videos into French and then uploading them? And Claire, would you be willing to take on the task? I'm gonna be honest, that would be a huge amount of work when you consider that, say, a video of mine might be an hour and a half. So Claire would need to translate that, because you can't do that on the fly. Translating on the fly, especially when you speak quite quickly, which I do, is not going to be viable. So you'd need to, basically listen to the video, come up with a transcript, translate it. Bear in mind, of course, because these videos are humorous, there are puns, wordplays, idioms. Some of that isn't going to work in French, so you need to come up with the nearest possible equivalent. And then you need to try and find a way to sync it up, because a sentence in French and a sentence in English aren't necessarily going to be the same length. Sometimes they'll be shorter, sometimes they'll be longer. It would be a huge amount of work. So while it might be nice to access French audiences, because, absolutely there are tons of French speakers around the world, it's just not viable. It would be a huge amount of work. In fact, honestly, I suspect it would be a full-time job. John, I do hope you actually finish the Outer Wilds. I will finish the Outer Wilds. As I understand it, I'm maybe like 1 or 2 live streams away from getting to the end of it. So absolutely we will get that done, because the Outer Wilds is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And don't forget to give yourself a pat on the head for all your work, Claire a hug, and Tabby a scritch. I have gone and given Tabby a scritch. Claire is not here right now, but I will give her a hug when she gets home, and I can confirm I am currently patting myself on the head. Ooh, a fun question for Claire here. So, John has finally cracked under the pressure and decided to go on a quest to find the finest linen shirts in all the world, leaving you with the channel and no backlog for 2 weeks. What games would you play that we might not normally see on the channel, maybe including a midweek mini-series and a live stream?
Oh, that's interesting. I had to think about that one a little. I think the only thing that I would want to play that's not been on channel properly before is Sims 4, just because John doesn't like that game, and there are some fun things we could do, like looking at some of the careers. There is an influencer career in the game, and as far as I can tell from watching other people's Let's Plays, it's kind of ridiculous. So that might be a fun thing to look at and to structure a video around. As for live streams, I'd want it to be something really chill. So I'd probably be going around like Steam or asking other people like, what's a game that is chill in the vein of Islanders? Just because I don't want to be playing the same thing over and over again, and I've already played Islanders a couple times on the channel. But apart from that, I'd probably want to look at games like Curious Expedition or Renowned Explorers, something like For the King, or even Slay the Spire, something that's is fun and has a bit of a narrative behind it, but is also turn-based. But also I would like to say, as much as I'd love to, hold down the fort and make sure the channel can keep going, if John decides to go on holiday for any length of time, I'm gonna want to go with him, because we haven't had a holiday in a super long time.
During the Discovery Tour Ancient Greece video, you mentioned at one point how somebody got drunk, broke the penises off a bunch of statues, and how this caused a genuine political and constitutional crisis. Can you go into more detail about this? Yes, Yes, I can. So the individual in question was, well, okay, let's be honest. We do not know who snapped the penises off the statues. However, the context for this is Athens is considering whether to launch an expedition to basically go and invade Sicily in order to lock down some friends, allies, and let's be honest, vassals and slaves over in that part of the world. By the standards of naval empires at that time in history, Sicily is a ridiculously long way away. It will be by far the furthest away holding Athens were to have, even if they were to be able to lock it down. But they've been promised in slightly vague terms that if they went over to Sicily, there'd be a bunch of people waiting to help them out, so there'd be locals to help them, army standing by. They wouldn't be going and doing this alone. It would be absolutely fine. Just come, help us out, giant piles of gold for you. And one of the people just standing in front of the Athenian assembly saying, hey, giant piles of gold, super easy conquest, hooray for controlling cities in Sicily was Alcibiades. However, the night before they're due to set sail, the Herms are mutilated. These are basically blocks of stone with a head on top and a penis coming out to the front. That's just what a Herm is. It's a slightly obscure type of religious statue they had in ancient Athens. But someone went around and snapped all the penises off these statues. And this is a problem. This is a very, very big problem because Athenian religion isn't really dogmatic or moral, specifically. It's more about rituals and omens, and penises being snapped off a statue is seen as a very, very bad omen indeed. But the question is, who snapped the penises off the statues? Because Alcibiades' political enemies immediately pinned the blame on him. Various witnesses were produced, but whether those were real witnesses or whether they were paid off to just be false witnesses, we don't know. We have no way of knowing. This is pure speculation. Alcibiades basically said, definitely wasn't me, and by the way, he was actually a general on this expedition that's about to set off. So he says, alright, fine, you say it's me, give me a trial, I will prove my innocence. They say, no, we couldn't possibly get in the way of the Sicilian expedition, Alcibiades. You just go off with your army, we will do a trial for you when you get back. Obviously, this was a massive trap, but there was nothing he could do. He was appointed general, the expedition was leaving, he had to go with it. But the moment he wasn't there to defend himself, obviously, the rumour mill goes into overdrive and his opponents start spreading more rumours about him. How he'd snapped even more penises off even more statues, and how he'd got drunk and profaned some other religious stuff he wasn't supposed to be profaning at the time, and diddly-diddly-dee. Basically, they blamed him for literally everything in the world, and got people so worked up when he wasn't there to defend himself, they basically demanded a fast ship be sent to go and arrest him, and bring him back to face a trial that would at this point almost certainly condemn him to death, because they'd laid enough groundwork and sowed enough lies in his absence. Alcibiades, being basically my favourite figure in history, decides, okay, so they're about to kill me, aren't they? So what we're going to do instead is go and join Sparta. We're going to go and talk Sparta into welcoming me into their society, even though we were literally just about to go and engage in the Sicilian expedition, which would have involved attacking some of Sparta's allies. So technically I'm at war with Sparta right now. In fact, I'm the general leading an army in the war against a Spartan ally. But screw it, I'm going to go to Sparta and try and talk them round. And Alcibiades, let me tell you, if any human being has ever had Charisma 10, Speech 100, Alcibiades had Charisma 10, Speech 100. He basically talked the Spartans round into welcoming him into their society. Athens, meanwhile, tried him in absentia twice in a row. Once when he didn't show up for the Herm situation, at which point they confiscated all his stuff and condemned him to death. Then they heard he joined Sparta, at which point they tried him in absentia a second time and reconfiscated the same stuff and condemned him to death again, just because he felt like it. But given a few years he got bored of Sparta, naffed off somewhere else, went to Persia, managed to talk those guys round, as I say, Speech 100, then eventually made his way back to Athens, because despite having 2 death sentences hanging above his head, that didn't stand in his way. He just basically came back and talked him round again. Yeah, Alcibiades is great. Will You Ever Produce Fallout New Vegas is just the best. Not that, but I do have something in mind just basically talking about amazing stuff in Fallout New Vegas. Yes, I do have something in mind for that, but it's not quite a, better than you think, but even better than that. No, it's something a bit more specific. Watch this space. Have you ever heard of or played Civilization? Yes, this is like Civilization that works within Excel, isn't it? It is a fun little experiment, but honestly, because I don't need to, like, be in Excel pretending to work, I can just, play Civilization. I might just play Civilization. I like Civilization. I was playing some Civilization recently, actually, playing as Marley. I love Marley. Marley's just flipping great. John, when you say things like something's a bit on the expensive side, is that a catchphrase, or do you repeat certain things out of habit? I never really meant to have a catchphrase. By the way, if I have catchphrases, it's just because these are phrases I happen to use a lot, so if I've accidentally created a series of catchphrases, it was never intentional. These are just common expressions I use on a day-to-day basis. A very interesting observation about the Outer Worlds here, which is someone pointing out that, yeah, the Unreliable doesn't feel like home in the same way that the Normandy does, which I guess is true in my experience as well, but I'm struggling to really, conclude why. Maybe the fact that it doesn't really get, like, a full-on introduction, if you like. You come across and it's just sort of like sitting in a field, and then you basically steal it from its former owner, then you're straight on to the next world. So you don't really do much business on the ship. Whereas, when you're actually playing Mass Effect, there's a lot more business to be done on the ship because, things are a lot more spread out. All your crew on very different decks. You spend a bit more time going around, catching up with people, various different upgrade spots in different rooms. You spend a bit more time going around from place to place. Maybe it's the fact that it's more customizable as well. I can't deny, I'm disappointed that when you find, like, bits of decoration in the world, in the Outer Worlds, you can't choose where they go. They just go wherever they go. They just go in a predetermined location. I'd like the option to, decorate my ship as I want to be decorated, but you don't seem to actually have that option. If it shows up, I haven't got to it yet, so that's a bit disappointing. And maybe the fact that the ship doesn't actually play an active role in the story. Like, the Normandy, it's repeatedly stressed that Normandy is an important part of things because the Normandy is a stealth ship, so it has abilities that other ships do not have. You are being deployed because you are the crew of the Normandy, and the Normandy is uniquely well qualified to go into a situation that other ships couldn't get to. The Unreliable doesn't actually have anything noteworthy about it. It is a standard cargo ship that happens to be in possession of a working skip drive, but that's literally it. There's nothing desperately special about it, which is true. And it doesn't really get involved in the missions. Like, on occasion, say, the Normandy will do a very low pass to actually drop off the Mako right into the middle of the action. Or you might call down the Normandy to do an emergency pickup if the mission's going a bit on the squiffy side. So, maybe it's just because the ship doesn't get involved. It's mainly just a transport to get you from A to B. It doesn't quite integrate into the story as well as the Normandy does. But that's a very interesting point there. John, last month you announced the adjustment of the schedule. Is there a series or challenge run you're most excited to get back into the schedule? Honestly, not one thing in particular, but there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm very glad to just, get back. So, Crusader Kings 2 coming back, and You Only Live Once coming back. Obviously, we've got the Outer Worlds right now. So, there's a lot of stuff kind of coming back, which is pretty exciting to me. But I wouldn't say there's, like, one thing more than any other. It's just nice to have some of the classic stuff returning. John, thank you for the amazing History of VATS video, and I saw that while it has a very good number of views, it has a lot less than some of your other video essays. Might this affect the future of MATN video essays in general? Not particularly, because you never can predict. You can never predict how well a video is going to do. Like, I could never have predicted that Fallout 3 is Better Than You Think was going to get, like, 5 million plus views. That's just ridiculous. And none of the other video essays have come close to that, and that's fine. Because generally they get shared around a bit more and they do bring in new subscribers, which is very, very good indeed. And they come with very long watch times, which the YouTube algorithm likes. They tend to float around in the sidebar more than other videos do. They absolutely have a purpose, though I did find it kind of funny that the Gunrunners Arsenal video, which I was able to put together in a single day, has already been more viewed than the VATS essay that took maybe, I don't know, probably about half a week of solid work to put together, maybe slightly more than that. But you never can flipping tell, can ya? Which Mass Effect game has the best Normandy and Citadel? Mass Effect 1 for both. The Mass Effect 1 Normandy is the best because it doesn't have any loading zones in it. Okay, it's got that really slow elevator, which is disguising loading, but it doesn't actually take you to, like, a separate loading screen where you're seeing a schematic of the ship or anything. As far as your character's concerned, they are basically never leaving the same single area, which is really, really important to me because it makes the ship all feel connected. I never liked the Normandy in Mass Effect 2 and 3 as much because, yeah, you had to go into that little elevator loading screen to move from floor to floor, which made it feel like 4 separate ships stacked on top of each other. So yeah, Mass Effect 1 for the Normandy, and for the Citadel too, because the Mass Effect 1 Citadel was massive versus the Mass Effect 2 and 3 Citadels, which are very, very small and compact. And it needs to be big, because the whole point is it's this massive, ridiculous alien spaceship, and you just don't get that sense of scale with Mass Effect 2 and 3. Like in Mass Effect 1, when you arrive at the Citadel for the first time, everyone gathers round the window and is just blown away by how stupidly large it is. And you just don't get that when the entire Citadel that you can explore is just this small area of a few shopping districts stacked on top of each other. But in Mass Effect 1, while there's lots of unnecessary empty space in it, it gives the whole thing a sense of scale. And there are fast travel points, so you don't have to run around if you don't want to, but I always do so anyway because I always enjoy feeling like I'm in this massive, giant ring world thing that just sort of exists and no one even understands how it functions because it predates all of the civilizations currently living on it. It's just lovely. Mass Effect 1 all the way. Best game in the franchise. When is Crusader Kings coming back? Either after the Outer Worlds or after the Outer Worlds and Pokemon, but it might be making a little appearance in a different form before that. Watch this space. Did you change your recording setup for Ring Fit Adventure? Not particularly, it was pretty much my standard recording space for consoles, except I was just standing rather than sitting. So pretty much it was just the standard setup, to be honest. And have you considered naming the Patroncast after the month you release it in, instead of last month's Patroncast? No. This is tradition at this point. It's tradition that we are in the month, sort of. 20 whatever it is, Patroncast, that's tradition. We can't change that. John, what the flip is wrong with the British government? Oh, I don't flipping know. Don't ask me. It's going to take someone more wise than me to unpick that Gordian knot. John, as someone with an insight into both marketing and video games, what do you think about what Bethesda is doing with Fallout First? My instinct for what they're doing right now is they are not confident that they can actually grow the user base and create a sustainable environment just by virtue of continually selling the game to more and more people. So what they're doing instead is saying, okay, we do have a certain number of core users who are super into the game. So we're going to try and monetize those individuals more effectively by moving them from sporadic atom purchasers to a monthly subscription. And absolutely, there will be a big old pile of people who will very happily sign up to Fallout First, have a lovely time with it, and stay on it until such time as the servers get shut down, whenever that eventually happens. So basically, as far as I can tell, Bethesda just wants to try and monetize those individuals. Whales isn't the right term. I've seen people say, oh yeah, Bethesda's just whale hunting. Those people aren't whales though. Whales tend to be higher spending than that. These people are just like, they're not minnows, but they're not whales either. They're tuna. These people are tuna. So basically Bethesda wants to cultivate a decent group of tuna who they just monetize on a regular basis. Because the nice thing about getting people onto a subscription plan rather than sporadic one-off purchases is it makes your cash flow much more predictable. Because you know there's going to be a certain amount of money coming in each month, and you can also predict how many people are going to drop out because you can just sort of calculate an average churn rate on a month-to-month basis. So you can factor that in ahead of time as well. So yeah, I can see what they're doing. And it makes sense, but it also implies potentially they're starting to lose faith in their ability to salvage the situation in such a way as there's going to be a big influx of new people. It feels like they're doubling down on monetizing the existing base more than growing it. That's just my take and my instinct though, I cannot prove that. Who's the best Outer Worlds companion and why is it Parvati? Ah, I see you are an individual of culture as well. John, does it ever bother you that some other YouTubers might do some of the runs associated with yourself before you actually do so? Like no kill, kill everything, or you only live once? Not at all, if anything, I'm flattered. I'm absolutely flattered that, I've invented a rule set that other people think is interesting and want to do. I don't own these terms, and I almost certainly wasn't the first person to do, a a complete pacifist run of New Vegas, or who went around New Vegas trying to kill literally everyone just to see how the plot would compensate, because, loads of people do that all the flipping time. So, I don't know if I was the first person to fully document it. In 2013, I doubt it, to be honest, because, Vegas had been out for 3 odd years at that point, just under 3 years. So someone else must have done that first. I wasn't the first. I might have been the first person to, popularise it, but 100%, I didn't invent that. And you only live once, well, that's just a permadeath with some extra rules stacked on top. So, to be honest, I didn't invent that either. So if people want to use those terms and do those runs, more power to them as far as I'm concerned. John, I couldn't help but notice a glimpse of the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion that found its way into the History of VATS video. Yeah, I thought I'd include that, just to basically mess with some people. In order to actually get that footage, I needed to install Oblivion, build a character, and play through the introductory bit in the prison and the sewers, just to actually get outside. I'm sure you recognise that area outside was literally just outside the sewers, just where you begin the game. So I wanted that tiny bit of footage just for a few seconds, but it took me 30 minutes to actually get there, to get that footage. That was very, very inefficient, but whatever. There is not currently a plan to make a series of Oblivion anytime soon, but watch this space. Next year, maybe. John, who would you include on your Mount Rushmore of British comedians, Mount Britmore? Okay, I can't give you 4, but I will say I would definitely include Chris Morris, who was the writer and creator of The Day-to-Day and Brass Eye, together with a few new films more recently, and Armando Iannucci, who has written basically everything, huge numbers of things that I've loved. He wrote Death of Stalin very recently, my favourite film of whatever year that came out. Was that 2 years ago now? Probably 2 years ago now. Love The Death of Stalin. Absolutely spectacular film. So damn funny. So we'll just put those 2 up there and that's fine. We'll just have them bigger to fill the space. We all know that Growlithe is your favourite Pokemon. Lies! Lies, lies, lies. My favourite Pokemon is Exeggutor. And not the stupid new Exeggutor, the old classic Exeggutor, the best Exeggutor. But, to get back to your question, what would a Galarian Growlithe be like? Well, Galarian basically just means really British, so I guess if you just make it much bigger and fluffier and poofier, that it could be like an old English sheepdog Growlithe. That would probably work right there. Basically just a super poofy Growlithe. John, is it you or Claire who's the Firefly fan? Me first. I was introduced to that when I was at university, so, approximately 72 years ago at this point. And then I introduced Claire to it because she'd never seen it when she moved to the UK. So I had the DVD box set, so we watched that together. So yeah, we both do know Firefly, and you're not wrong, there are most definitely similarities between Firefly and the Outer Worlds. Specifically in the way people talk, I think, especially Parvati. You can vaguely notice in some of the tone and vocabulary, it feels like there's a connection to Firefly. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe they were just going for a vaguely Western theme and the Firefly connection is just coincidental. After all, of course, New Vegas also had a Western thing. Maybe they're just doing a vague Western lilt to some of the characters in honour of New Vegas, which had a big Western thing. But I suspect there's a connection to Firefly. And speaking of similarities, I'd love to hear your opinion on The Expanse, and I would love to give it to you, but sadly, I have never played it, so I cannot tell you about similarities between that and Mass Effect. But at some point, I will give it a look-see. John, would you consider doing some other classic Interplay titles as a one-off? I think you'd rip through the Star Trek 25th anniversary, and it'd be hilarious. Absolutely, I am planning to go back to that catalogue at some point, I just don't know precisely when, because obviously I'm most interested in the ones that have a connection to the Fallout franchise. John, having witnessed a scrum to get in a bust, my question is, why can't Americans queue? I don't know. Why can't you also just be a good little colony that pays its taxes? John, in the apocalypse, what modern convenience would be hardest to get by without? Widespread, easy to access electricity, because you can say the internet, but without electricity there's no internet. You can say refrigeration, but without electricity there's no refrigeration. So electricity kind of basically underpins the vast majority of our modern civilization. So it's got to be easy to access electricity. John, with various video essays planned and the history of VATS already released, how is Fallout 4 Is Better Than You Think going to stand out from the other essays? Oh, don't you worry. Don't you flippin' worry on that. That is one thing that is not going to be an issue. That essay is going to stand out. That essay is going to have a whole new format to it, alright? I know precisely how it's going to work. I haven't read a single word of it yet in terms of the final script, but don't you worry, that is the last of the problems. That video essay is going to stand out. Alright, very, very much so. John, on the topic of the new schedule, are you getting more rest? Okay, not yet. The new schedule has slightly failed in giving me more time off so far, but I live in hope. Okay, we live in flipping hope. As soon as it settles down and the Outer Worlds is done, maybe at that point I might get a day off a week, I'm not sure. Also, what's the best way to interact with you and Claire? Probably we're most active on Twitter. But if, like, you know, you've got a specific question you want answering, then right here on Patreon in the Patroncast is probably the best place to get, like, a thorough answer to a specific question. But just in terms of, like, day-to-day, we're probably most active on Twitter. Having just started the Outer Worlds, would you consider doing a kill everyone run? It looks very possible. It might indeed be fun. It might be very fun indeed. So, I don't know for certain. Like, you know, I wouldn't take that on without doing a bit of research into how it works going forward. So, maybe. Watch this space. Have you seen the recent moves by Microsoft with Mixer and the Game Pass with a very good selection of games? Yes, I have, and I must say, it's been pretty positive so far. I think Microsoft are making some sensible moves there. Mixer is making more progress than I was expecting against Twitch. I thought Twitch was just, pretty dominant for the time being. But Microsoft's throwing their money around, and I think they're making some relatively sensible acquisitions in terms of talent. And in terms of the Game Pass for PC, honestly, it's a good selection. I think it's very, very good value. I think you get a really, really damn good selection of games at a decent price. So if you would rather, be paying a subscription to access games, it's probably the best one going out there at the minute. I would have previously said that about Origin. I'd probably say that actually, the new PC Game Pass, it's probably better than Origin, actually. It's definitely better than the Uplay one. Uplay, is it called Uplay Plus? That one strikes me as not particularly interesting, to be honest. But I'd say of the subscription services on PC at the moment, the Microsoft Game Pass is probably the best one. So, good work by Microsoft, really. I think they're doing a good job. Could it be time to let the Worms political simulator work its magic over the whole Brexit affair? Well, we don't really need to, because now there's gonna be a general election anyway, so watch this space. It is coming. How are views doing for the Outer Worlds? What's really interesting is, you follow up by saying, are they down? Because people don't want to get spoiled. A whole bunch of people said, I'm so sorry I can't watch this because I want to play it for myself first. Yet views don't appear to be, low or anything. Views are very, very good indeed. In fact, this happens a lot. Sometimes when a brand new game comes out people are excited for, people say, oh no, we can't watch this yet. I'm so sorry if views are down. But I think the number of people that do that is actually quite small. Or, if it's significant, they're more than offset by new people coming in who do actually want to see the new game. Because, honestly, views have been really, really damn strong for the Outer Worlds so far. So, don't worry about that. Absolutely fine. Series doing very, very well indeed. Hopefully you'll catch up with it when you've actually played the game yourself. John, what's your favourite faction in Total War Napoleon? I couldn't tell you, to be honest. It is, to be perfectly honest, my least favourite Total War game of all of them. I just don't get Napoleon, which is weird, because I actually think Empire's pretty darn good, but Napoleon, for whatever reason, just doesn't speak to me. I just don't enjoy it. So, sorry, I've just not put much time into it. I played it a bit, I found it a bit on the frustrating side. It's just not for me, so I could not tell ya. John, Mountain Blade Warband when? Soon. Soon. Yeah, we would have had more of it already if it weren't for the Outer Worlds, so blame the Outer Worlds, not my fault, totally Obsidian's fault. John, you have been abducted by aliens to participate in a prime-time arena deathmatch. You'll be facing other species you know nothing about. As a pre-selected gimmick, you are only allowed to use a weapon which will be available on Earth pre-1500. Choose your weapon. Okay, if I don't know anything about the aliens, they don't know anything about me either. So the important thing is to go in with something that's going to intimidate them because they don't know what it is. So I'm going to go for the largest musical instrument I can think of, a grand cathedral organ. So basically, I'm just going to sit at that, and if anyone even comes anywhere near me with their Waflusian death stick or whatever, I'm just going to jam down on some keys, and it's going to make the mother of all racket, and people are going to assume, because you were asked to pick a weapon, that therefore, I've got some form of terrifying steampunk doom weapon, and run for the flipping hills and take each other out. And therefore, I win by default with my giant organ. Aha! I have outwitted the reality TV show. John, what is your favourite soup? I'm gonna be honest, I am the most basic soup bitch imaginable. I just like Heinz tomato soup so much. Just give me Heinz tomato soup and I will be a happy camper. And finally, John, you used to be a corporate show. Oh, thank you very much. How would the younger you have rebranded loot boxes? Honestly, I can't properly answer this question because I cannot ever come up with an answer better than EA already came up with surprise mechanics. They're not loot boxes, they're surprise mechanics. Oh, well played, EA. It is simultaneously the best and worst thing I have ever flipping heard. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the Patroncast. Thank you all so very, very much for joining me on this wandering, meandering series of answers, observations, and me talking about this last month. It's been a good month, though. I think it's been a really good month. Like, if I look at the videos we've put out in the last 30-odd days, I am really damn proud of what we've done. So even if in terms of the hard, cold, numerical analytics side of things, we've only done slightly better, I feel good. I feel good about what we're producing, and we've got a lot of really, really damn good stuff coming up too. I've got something so special planned for next week as well. Something really special on Tuesday, something really special next Saturday as well. So, watch this space. Keep an eye out on those days in particular because, oh yeah. We have got some good stuff coming up. Hopefully, by the end of November, I'll have a more clear picture as to whether I want to make any further changes, if I'm broadly happy with how things are for the time being. We'll see about that. I'll keep a very close eye on it. Thank you all so very, very much for keeping this whole business going because, the thing is, I can only make these changes because of you guys. Because if I was dependent on ad revenue on YouTube, I'd basically have no choice but to constantly chase views and do whatever it took to get more views, no matter how clickbaity it got or whether I was doing stuff I actually wanted to do or not or enjoyed or not. I'd just have to do whatever the views were because that's the only way to make sure that Tabby can keep eating her extremely expensive preferred cat food. But yeah, as it is, we've got Patreon and that means I can produce stuff that I love, and I think we've been producing great stuff in October. Hopefully we will do the same in November. Thank you all so very, very much for your ongoing support. It's you that's let me do this, and that's wonderful. That's just flipping wonderful. Hopefully I will see you for the next month's Patroncast as well. But in the meantime, I've been John. This has been Many a True Nerd, and this has been the October sort of 2019 Patroncast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.